Awesome. So recording has started. For the purposes of the recording, we have not reached quorum. Nevertheless, we're going to proceed with the agenda as it has been presented. We'll go through the approval of the agenda informally and continue with discussion items. And if the meeting does reach a quorum, we will do a formal call to order and proceed from there. So I will informally call us to order at 5:12. We'll start with the territorial acknowledgement. The Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association acknowledges that our work takes place on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. Waterloo is situated on the Haldimand Tract, land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. As we are gathered electronically, I think it's important for us to recognize the ongoing impacts that colonialism has on our world and how this global phenomena has been localized wherever we find ourselves. And I encourage all the members present to do some reflection about how that impacts the world in which we live. Next is the approval of the agenda. So there is a motion. Be it resolved that the general meeting approve the agenda as presented. Now, the general meeting is empowered to change the order of items. We're in a bit of a predicament because we haven't actually formally come to order, but nevertheless, we'll discuss the order of business and see where that takes us. So, Laura, please go ahead. Actually, I think I have to unmute you, or I'll allow you to unmute. Could you raise your hand again? Sorry.
I can unmute now. Is that good?
Oh, yeah, perfect.
Great. I propose we switch the order of items 8, the goose statue, and 9, public health measures on the agenda.
Thanks, Laura. So that would have us discuss the member proposal on COVID-19 public health measures before the member proposal on the campus goose statue.
Yes.
Excellent. So I guess one way we can do this is ask if anybody opposes that. And I guess raise your hand and I can call on you to speak. Otherwise, if it appears uncontroversial, I think we can just go ahead and make that change. Vincent? You should be allowed to unmute. I cannot hear you, Vincent.
Can you hear?
Yes.
I think, the agenda sent out partly out of respect for people who might, really, I don't think.
I'm going to interrupt you, Vincent. You are cutting in and out. Apologies. Do you think you could try again to?
Can you hear me? I hate him so much.
We've heard your lament. If I might try to interpret what I think I've heard you say. Sure, I will permit you to use the chat to explain what you would like to say. In the meantime, Edward had raised a hand. I can unmute you and you can speak if you would like.
Yeah, what I was gonna say is that in the interest of going through the agenda as the order was advertised to members, because we do have, I think, members who are planning on arriving later, and an interest to make sure we have everyone is, on the same page with where we're going to be at during the meeting at certain points. It would be best to go through the motions in the order on the website.
Thanks, Edward. And Vincent has concurred. So given that we are not in order, we can't really have a formal motion. I will say that we'll continue with the agenda as it has been presented on the board on the WUSA website. And we will proceed on that basis, which will bring us to item number 4 on the agenda, which is receiving the fiscal year 2021 audit report and the appointment of the fiscal year 2022 auditors. The general meeting will have an opportunity to review last fiscal year's audited financial statements, to ask questions about the audit report. There is a motion to reappoint the present auditors. Because we do not have quorum, we can't transact business. So that motion will be, I suppose, referred to the board for consideration about how to proceed. So at this time, I will invite the general manager of WUSA to speak briefly to the audit report for the last year. So please go ahead, Suzanne. If you could raise your hand, perhaps, so I can decide to unmute you. Okay, you should be able to go now, Suzanne. You will have to unmute yourself. I've allowed you to unmute.
Okay, there we go. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Okay, so Ben, can I either share my screen, or can you share, I guess I can just share my screen, I'm assuming.
You are a presenter, so you should be able to.
Okay. So let me know if I think that everyone can see that.
Looks good.
Okay, great. So hi, everyone. Thanks, Ben. I'm Suzanne. I'm the general manager for WUSA, and I'm just going to go through last year's audited statement. So from May 1st, 2020 to April 30th, 2021, and I'm going to go through 2 statements. The first one being the statement of financial position, and the second one being the statement of operations. So the statement of financial position reflects, well, the overall financial position for Federation of Students, or WUSA, depending on the legal name or the operating name. So what you're looking at is basically a look at our net worth as an organization as of April 30th, 2021. So it lists our assets, our liabilities, and then the net assets or equity section of the organization. I will note that both this statement and the other statement is broken down into funds. So you'll see 9 different funds across the top. The general fund is where the majority of our, I guess I'll say, activities happen, where we collect the student life fee, the operations fee, and the academic support and advocacy fee, along with any of our other ancillary operations, such as retail food, and those kinds of things. So that fund being unrestricted in its use, as opposed to the other 8, which are restricted. And what I mean by that is, when we collect a fee from students specifically for the dental, health, or legal fund, or any of the others, we are restricted in being able to use it only for the purposes of that fund. So I will move from that statement to statement of operations, or I'll try to anyways. Why is that not doing that? Weird. This way then. There we go. So the statement of operations is our income statement for the year from May 1st, 2020 to April 30th, 2021, and shows all of our revenue, expenses, and then our bottom line surplus or deficit. So you'll notice the general fund, and just a couple of notes I'll just sort of highlight being in spring of 2020, we didn't collect some fees, specifically out of the student life fee, the special events and clubs fee, as well as we didn't collect the orientation fee for the past year or the UPass fee, other than students could opt in winter of 2021. Also noting that all the societies are sort of, well, I guess they're consolidated into one fund for presentation purposes. I guess the last part of that, you'll just notice the surpluses at the bottom and some deficits. The majority of the general fund surplus is made up of a couple of areas, one being investments, which the way generally accepted, whatever it is, GAAP, that's awful, but I can't think of the word at the moment, says we have to recognize the income on our investments, even if we haven't sold them. So the market value, we have to take them to market value, whether there's a profit or a loss that's recognized in the year that we're reporting. The second area for the surplus for the general fund was in salaries, where we had some turnover in salaries, and we did not necessarily, I'll say we sort of mapped out when we would hire people based on the obvious changing circumstances in the last year and a bit. So I think that's all I was going to highlight. I'm not sure whether anyone has any questions. I'll do my best to try and answer, and if I'm not able to, encourage you to send me them by email, and I'm happy to respond at another time, a little later.
Thank you, Suzanne. So if folks have questions about the audited financial statements, please raise your hand. We can try to answer those questions. I'll repeat that these documents are available on the WUSA website on the annual general meeting agenda, like landing page. They are, public documents, so we're required to do an audit by the university, and of course it's a good practice for a nonprofit corporation. So it appears that there are no questions. Suzanne, I'll ask if you could stop sharing your screen.
Absolutely. Okay.
Thank you.
Great, thanks.
And so again, the motion to reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct the fiscal year 2022 audit will be referred back to the board for consideration about how to approach that, so that we have somebody to do our audit next year. I saw a question in the chat. Are there documents that elaborate each criteria? Natalie or Nathalie, would you like to, if you're able, unmute and perhaps elaborate? I'll find your name and allow you to unmute if you so choose. Nathalie?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I didn't realize you already unmuted me. So I mean, like, besides the audit document itself, are there any other documents that we can see in the WUSA page so we can see more details in each expense and each criteria that was elaborated in that table?
Thanks. So on the documents that are posted on the website, and I'll maybe ask one of the presenters to repost the link to that. There are like rather extensive notes to the financial statements from the auditors about the how, like, the sort of methodological stuff. I'm not an auditor or an accountant, so I can't elaborate much, but there is like quite a bit of elaboration, and I believe that there is also sort of as like a cover sheet to the financial statements that were just presented, like the audit opinion from PricewaterhouseCoopers, that's addressed to the members. So there is a fair deal more elaboration. It's about a 16-page document that includes those two financial statements that were just presented. So does that address your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And I'll just say again for my purpose, if folks could raise their hands, it is a bit easier to administer the question asking and so on. And we will go on to item number 5, which is a progress report on WUSA governance. And I will share my screen. And I'll say I'm on my laptop, so I cannot see the chat or raised hands. So I will sort of proceed with my presentation through to the end, and at that point, we'll take questions. And somebody interrupt me if something has gone horribly wrong. So this is a update on the governance review, which you may have heard of. We'll talk about the background, why we want to change our governance, how to go about these changes, discussion on the proposed election systems that we've considered, an explanation of what the new model will look like, and plans for the spring term and beyond. First, the 2020 to 2025 strategic plan has prioritized a comprehensive review of WUSA's governance. In fall of 2021, additionally, our annual plan this year made a priority of this strategic priority. In fall 2021, we began working with professional consultants to assess our existing governance structure. By November, our board of directors and students council had accepted in principle the main proposal of the consultants that we merge both of our governing bodies and reduce the number of officers. And I'll just elaborate a little bit. Often we talk about the executives. So myself, the president, and our 3 vice presidents. We are executive officers of WUSA. We'll refer to officers throughout this presentation, which includes the general manager as an officer, the speaker of students council as an officer, the chair of the board. So people who are in specific positions, one of the proposals that will be elaborated is a reduction of the number of officers. On the 1st of February, a special general meeting approved postponing the election no later than September 1st of this year by way of a temporary amending bylaw. So then that brings us to why should we change our governance? The first reason is that WUSA has outgrown the existing governance system. With over 30,000 members, a $7 million annual operating budget, over $40 million a year in transfers and programs like UPass and student care insurance, and transfers to the faculty societies. We have over 40 full-time staff, hundreds of part-time staff and volunteers, and our organization is growing every year. Our current bicameral system of a students council and a board of directors is a bit confusing. With over 400 pages of policies and procedure manuals that have sort of developed through iterative change each year, without much sort of strategic foresight about what we're trying to accomplish through our governance. The impact of this bicameral system is also a siloing of student leaders where people are perhaps on council and interested in corporate affairs, or on the board of directors and interested in advocacy. And our system tends to prevent people from thinking more broadly. And another important reason that we are moving forward with this project is a chronic burnout among student executives who often face unrealistic demands and are ill-equipped to affect the organizational changes that they campaign on. And that's because these roles are, it's a lot of managerial work to which the people in the roles have no experience. And just in general, student leaders are better at advocacy than they are at administration. And a lot of the issues that we experience are from that gap. So how to change our governance? Part one is we need to approve new bylaws. Following the acceptance of the consultant's report, we tasked our legal counsel with preparing a draft, and that first draft included the officers being selected among the board, so the president and the vice president selected among the 13 directors, and those 13 directors being elected at large without faculty constituencies, and I'll elaborate this more later. At first reading, council had asked the officers to be directly elected, so the president and the vice president campaigning for those offices and being elected at the same time as the board, instead of the indirect election among the board. And they also demanded some form of faculty representation in the new election system. At second and third readings this past month, Students' Council joined the board in supporting the faculty guarantee elections model, which I'll elaborate. And council will vote to approve the bylaws this coming Sunday, followed by board approval later in the month, following which a special general meeting will be called to ratify the bylaws, likely the week following the May long weekend. So this brings us to our discussion of proposed election systems. Board and council have considered several variations of a ranked ballot system to elect the non-officer board members. So that being all of the directors who are not the president and the vice president. So here are a sort of a high-level explanation of some variations. One is at-large elections, where members can vote for any candidate, regardless of a faculty affiliation, and successful candidates have to receive a quota of approximately 5% of all votes cast. This is, if you're interested, there's the idea of a droop quota, DROOP, and there's sort of some literature on like democratic systems and so on. Next is a constituency election where board seats are reserved proportionally to the size of faculties, for example, and members may vote only for candidates within that constituency. Then there are hybrid elections, which are some combination of the above. Faculty guarantee and ex officio models are what we specifically considered in the hybrid category, which I will discuss here. So first is the ex officio model, which would have 6 seats for candidates elected within faculties, so 1 per faculty. Then the remaining 5 seats would be elected at large. So any student can run for it, any student can vote for those 5 seats. And members would rank candidates from 2 discrete groups. So you would, on your ballot, vote for, this is who I want for my faculty seat, and this is who I want for my at-large votes. And candidates would have to choose to run for an at-large seat or a faculty seat. Then the faculty guarantee model has, similar to at-large, members can vote for any candidate, and all candidates run for the same 11 seats and have to reach a quota. However, 1 candidate per faculty is guaranteed to win unless nobody from the faculty runs. So this means that of the 11 seats, there will be people from all 6 faculties, as long as somebody from each faculty runs. Otherwise, it would be an at-large election, and the people with the most votes and who reach a quota through the runoff process win. So continuing on the election systems, why was the faculty guarantee model chosen by the board and council? So the constituency model that was described would need us to create separate member classes through amendments to our corporate charter, which has no distinction among undergraduate students. It just recognizes that our members are students. And there is sort of a risk of confusing that as a member of the board, you have a duty to represent the interests of all students. Whereas in a constituency system, if you're elected specifically by students from a given faculty, you're like the incentive system is such that you tend to consider those interests above others, which is not necessarily ideal at the board level. So the balance of the at-large election system and the need for faculty representation was sort of the winning compromise for the faculty guarantee. Having a single pool of candidates means that there would be more competitive races, fewer acclamations, simpler elections, and hopefully higher engagement in WUSA's democratic processes. And it would maximize the number of directors from unique faculties, which is still something that is valuable. And we've heard from counselors throughout the bylaw approval process. And of course, society interests will continue to be represented through committee structures, which I'll elaborate a little bit more on in a couple slides. So then that brings us to the new model. We will have a single governing body called the WUSA Board of Directors, with 13 members elected at large, including a president and a vice president, with the faculty guarantee election scheme for the non-officer directors. Of course, the president and the vice president will be elected at large. So the new officer roles are the executive director, who is a permanent full-time staff person, reports to the board of directors as the chief executive officer. So that would be presently is Suzanne, our general manager, who you heard from earlier. Then the president would be the chair of the board and leading advocacy for university affairs. The vice president would be leading external advocacy, including at WUSA and UCRU, our external political organizations. And the president and the vice president will remain full-time, as the current executive committee are. Then advocacy and stakeholder relations will be shared by all of the members of the board, and final approval for things like the audit, budget, policy, and strategic planning will be at board, though some of those decisions might be devolved in certain ways that we'll need to figure out, but the final governing authority is the board. Which brings us to how to change our governance part 2. So first, we need to approve new bylaws, which I discussed earlier. These are expected to come into force on the 1st of September. Then we'll need to elect a new board. We're planning this election for June, if the approval of the bylaws goes according to plan. And we will need to approve new elections procedures, likely in May, obviously before the election starts is ideal. Then we'll have the months of July and August to plan for orientation and transition, including drafting important procedures, including things like committee elections, basic rules of order for the new board, as well as planning for the new governing year and the next phase of the governance review, which is to take a look at our policies and procedures. So the 400 pages of documents hopefully will be condensed to something more manageable. Which brings me to my last slide, which is plans for spring 2022 and beyond. So the incumbent board and council and executives will stay in office until the new bylaws come into force. Council has requested plans for advocacy and society relations under the new model, specifically that the Education Advisory Council and the Committee of Presidents will be asked to give feedback and report by the end of the spring term on how to retain the things that work best, what the new model ought to consider. Then our full-time staff are starting to take on duties that have traditionally been done by the executive committee. And we are starting to inform stakeholders about these anticipated changes. So that's the end of my presentation. I'll stop sharing my screen and see if there are questions, and perhaps I'll okay, I see Laura. Might I ask, Catherine, do you think you could, well, I guess I'll administer still, and if people want me to go back to the slides, I might ask you to help, but we'll let Laura go ahead.
Sure, thanks for your presentation. It was a good presentation. I just have a question. You mentioned, the student body is getting bigger, 30,000 people. And you talked about burnout rate, which is definitely something to consider. I'm wondering, though, to me, it looks like you You also mentioned shrinking the number of officers. So are there fewer people now in charge? And if the answer is yes, when you're facing burnout and more people to serve, why are we deciding to shrink the top people?
Thanks, Alora. So I'll just say for this part of the agenda specifically, I will like intervene directly to answer questions. I know sometimes there have been concerns because I'm chairing the meeting, but I think it's fair that you're directing the question to me. So a lot of
Yes.
the report is available on our website. Perhaps somebody could link to it. It's in the library. A lot of the like reasoning behind it is that essentially sorry, it's difficult to be brief sometimes, I find. The existing model of Students' Council in the Board of Directors was designed around having the Board of Directors being responsible for operations of the organization. So council was sort of like the representatives of the membership, discussed issues and the political stances of the student association. The board was responsible for keeping the cash box and employing the handful of staff when the organization had, let's say, like 5,000 members in the 70s or something. And based on that logic, the executive officers were responsible for operations. So, the vice president internal would be responsible for society relations, the president for everything kind of at a higher level, the governance, and the vice president operations and finance for the budget, the vice president education for advocacy. As the organization has grown in scope, it becomes more and more difficult for these people to like keep track of things in a holistic way. We're kind of always just like running around like unable to do the amount of work that is demanded of us. And the reason for that is because like as the organization grows, it becomes necessary for us to redirect where our efforts are. There's a distinction between sort of the governance of the organization, which is establishing the priorities. What do we want to do? And then actually executing those priorities, which is the role of staff who go work at the direction of the student decision makers. So it's kind of paradoxical that like as the organization grows, the way that students exercise more control over it is by doing less. But it's because we're doing less like operational things and doing more in terms of thinking about the long-term direction in the priorities of the student body. So that's a very roundabout answer, but it's not about it's about refocusing where we put our efforts. And in a sort of strategic governing board, it's not necessary to have as many officers because staff are sort of empowered to do more.
Right. So you'll be sort of hiring more staff, perhaps. So you will have more people total, but you're shrinking the number of students because then it's going to be more manageable because you're not running around doing everything the staff's going to do.
That's a fair characterization, and I'll say a lot of these staff are already in place. So it's about allowing them to have, use their professional discretion in their subject matter expertise to sort of do things. Catherine, is it a logistical point? Or is it a comment about the question?
It is just a tack on to your answer to the question.
I'd ask you to raise your hand.
Okay, then I will not.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, Alora. So next is Mahir. And please tell me if I'm pronouncing your names incorrectly.
Yeah, it's Mahir. Yeah, I just had a quick question. You went over the elections, but I was just curious if we're going to keep, WUSA is going to keep the, what's it called, the signature requirement, the 25 for faculties and the 100 for at-large, or is that going to be changing?
Thanks. That's a good question. So likely we will include some sort of nomination requirement. It might change. It might stay the same. That's something that as we draft the elections procedures before the election starts, that is like when we'll consider it. So board and council will have eyes on it. So likely we will keep a nomination requirement. I can't say what specifically the numbers would be. Hopefully that answers your question. Cool.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. Next is Jay.
Thanks. Just two minor questions. I thought we have agreed that the new name of the governing body is still to be council, not the board. And the second question is, since the governing year has been extended, I'm wondering if all for executives will remain in the office.
Thanks, Jay. Yeah, so you're right. Council did do a straw poll where they suggested keeping the name council. Then when we received the next draft, it just never changed. Maybe I'll say if you could bring this up at council on Sunday, and I guess that would be sort of like the final time to do it. The name is, it could be named council or it could be named board. Like the substance of the model is like, the name is kind of trivial, but I guess the last opportunity to right now the draft bylaws that we have the name board, though I suppose council will approve on Sunday, so that would be, I guess, the last chance to make the change on the council side. Then your other question about how all 4 executives will remain in office through until the new bylaws come into force. I know some of us are intending to work sort of reduced hours, and right now we're planning for because of our academic obligations, and right now we're working on transitioning our full-time staff to make sure that there's sort of continuity in our operations. And I'm sure council will be apprised of that as well. But all of the incumbent members of the governance system, so councilors, members of the board, and executives will stay in office until the new bylaws come into force.
Do you mean the new board being elected or the new bylaw being?
So the election of the board likely will happen before the bylaws come into force. So there will be a period where the new board has been elected, but they haven't taken office yet. So the dates have not been finalized, but let's say the election is done by the 30th of June, then the existing incumbent members of the governance system will stay in office for July and August, and the new board will start on July 1st and will be doing, or sorry, on September 1st, for example. The date will probably be fixed by the special general meeting when they consider the ratification of the new bylaws. So yeah, the election will happen, then the coming into force will happen after that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Jay. Next is Abhiraj.
Thank you, man. So my question was regarding the faculty guarantee model. So and correct me if I'm wrong. So from what I understand, this way, if one person from a certain faculty is the only person running, they are well guaranteed to win the seat. My concern is that, so currently, if say one person was running, we would have the option to vote no, right? You would have a yes, no vote. Is there a similar model in place which would ensure that no one, that an unpopular candidate is not elected just because they were the only person from a certain faculty who was running?
That's an excellent question, Abhiraj. So my understanding is that in this model, there would not be a there would not be an acclamation vote, because essentially there are a couple of cases where so in the instance you described, where there's only a single candidate from a faculty, they would essentially be acclaimed at the start of the runoff voting process. And then the STB quota building process would continue from there. The other case is if a candidate fails to meet a quota and would be eliminated in the next round. So in a single transferable vote system, basically you calculate the number of votes assigned to each candidate, and then the one with the least votes is eliminated and their votes are distributed to the remaining candidates. So if at a point the only candidate from a given faculty were to be removed, they would essentially be acclaimed at that point. So that is, I guess, a risk to the new model. I think the idea of the faculty guarantee is that those instances will only happen on the margins in a single transferable vote system. It should be the case that like it's designed to build quotas anyway, so it shouldn't happen frequently, but it is possible. There wouldn't be posed like a single acclamation question because it would be happening sort of behind the scenes during the runoff calculation process. Does that answer your question?
It does. Thank you.
Thanks. So I think, Jay, this is a legacy hand, so I'm going to lower it. Then next is Midas.
Hi, thank you, Ben, for the presentation. I have a couple of questions more specific to services. So I would like to keep it short. The first one will be, do we know where services fall under based on this new governors? I read the document that I believe Catherine shared, and there is no like specific section about where services will be. And also, will we have a separate meeting to just talk about services and specifically equity seeking services and how they will be included as a stakeholder specifically for advocacy projects?
Sure. Thanks, Midas. So in the report of the consultants, they do mention the services briefly in that they, as you know, right now the Students' Council sort of has like the jurisdiction over the services, and the coordinators are ratified each year based on the hiring process that's done internally by full-time staff. The new model would essentially gets rid of that component and would help to sort of formalize the role of services as staff of the organization. With regards to the services advocacy piece, I understand that there have been like discussions about how that fits in, and there was discussion about it at council in like September or so. One of the things that we're trying to work through the spring term is how advocacy will work in the new model, where like presently we have sort of the full-time execs who take direction from council and so on. There, I think, is room to consider like how the services fit into specifically the equity seeking services fit into that picture, where like sorry, I'm trying to be brief, but like one of the things that we're considering for the like right now we have, for example, like the Education Advisory Council, which discusses anything that's like not co-op related. One idea for the new board of directors is to have a like sort of like these working groups in specific areas, and the services could fit into that. And I imagine council and board will, or council specifically, will have discussions about how that will work. So it's sort of an open question, something that remains to be seen, but there certainly will be a role for services in the new model. Catherine, is this, I suspect, probably related to the services question?
Yeah, I can also wait.
Okay. I think I'm realizing I probably should stay on the speaking order, just because it might get out of hand if I start picking different people.
Yeah, of course,
so
no worries at all.
Awesome. Okay, so then next will be Vincent. Oh, some hands disappeared. Okay. I don't know, Vincent, if that was a legacy hand, but now I see Sam first. I'm gonna say that somehow your hand was erroneously put down, so I'm gonna let you go first, Vincent.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I lowered my hand when you called on me. So I wanted to ask, with this faculty guarantee model, how can we make sure that the people who are elected for each faculty have the confidence of the students in that faculty, given that they're being elected at large and not by the members of their faculty?
Thanks, Vincent. So I think an important distinction to be made about the faculty guarantee model is that all of the directors serve all of the students, which is a distinction from how, like, for example, Students' Council works presently, where there's like an explicit relationship between like the representative and their constituents. The idea of the faculty guarantee model is not to have an assigned like representative who is expressly responsible for a particular group of students. It's more that there be among the 13 or among the 11 non-officer directors a reasonable like composition that sort of reflects the diversity of faculty. Not that the person elected from a faculty command the confidence of that faculty or have any sort of like specific relationship. Again, to reiterate, like the responsibility of the board is to all of the members. So the sort of like the acclamation, like, or I'll say like affirmative action sort of process whereby somebody kind of cuts the line should only happen on the margins. And given the like size of the board and the size of our institution, it should be the case generally that there is at least one person who is duly elected from each faculty every year. It's only for those instances where it might not happen that this like faculty guarantee provision sort of kicks in and overrides. We don't expect it to happen super frequently, just given the size of like the positions, the number of positions being elected and the size of the faculties. So hopefully that addresses your question. Okay. Then next is Sam, and I will allow their mic.
Thank you. So I just had a question kind of going back to the advocacy piece. It sounds like, at least the way I'm understanding what you said, so please clarify, is council would be kind of deciding these things. At what point, or will there be a point in which the services will be actually looped into the conversation to be able to share their piece and also ensure that this new model going forward actually works for us as well as council?
Thanks for your question. So, of course, the students involved with the services are themselves members and will be able to participate in like the democratic process under the new model, including selecting candidates or running for office themselves and running on priorities that are important to them. I think a lot of the spirit of the new model is that, to go back to, I think it was Alora's question about sort of why are we having like fewer officers if there's more stuff going on. I think part of the idea is that the services priorities be communicated through our like existing staff structures and through like, for example, like the director of campus wellness, and like making those priorities known to the directors. And there's also sort of like the importance of doing like effective like surveying of members and like understanding what the priorities of all of the membership is, but that includes like equity seeking communities, and having the discussions at the board table informed by those experiences. And I think the services sort of fit into that with, an ear on the ground, as it were, and are well placed to like inform those discussions. But it is sort of like formalizing the the role of the services as like staff of the organization is one of the things that's changing versus this kind of like ratification by council model where they're, you know, can kind of be like placed at the whim of like of elected students, and that's how it was designed. But we're sort of, you know, as we move towards like you know, paying service coordinators and things like that, their role as staff of the organization is sort of, it's moving in that direction, I guess I'll say. And maybe this is Catherine's, Catherine would be able to speak to services related stuff, which I think is why you had raised your hand initially.
Yeah, I guess I don't want to get too deep into the weeds of it, just because of the primary thing, which is the current bylaws also don't say anything about the services, because bylaws are the very like high level outline of the governing structure of the organization, where as Ben mentioned, currently services are sort of formalized through council procedures, which are not what we're looking at right now, where sort of with everything that we're looking at with committee structures and how elections will work and everything, it's sort of beginning to fill in the gaps after we outline like the thickest, the like most broadest structure of the organization, where after we pass bylaws, we sort of fill in those gaps of how everything operates underneath those bylaws, which includes services and of course happens in collaboration with the people who work most closely within services, who are coordinators. With respect to advocacy, there have been ongoing conversations, including those that have included coordinators, to understand how advocacy works across the organization so that we can build up a strong structure from which we can operate under the new model. And these are conversations that are going to be continuing for the next few months. They're happening here at general meetings, they're happening at council, which is open to at-large students, and they're happening internally in meetings with staff and with coordinators. So it is not something that has been decided yet because we're still working on it. And I guess that's, I perhaps should have planned this speaking turn a little bit better. But the biggest thing is bylaws are very high level, and that's why services are not addressed directly in bylaws. They aren't currently, which is why they're also not being discussed in this set of bylaws.
Thanks, Catherine. Next is Midas.
Thank you so much for that explanation. I just want to like put that on the radar that this is like a good opportunity for services to reevaluate how we interact with WUSA and how we do advocacy work, and make sure that like you know that there is a request from services to have specific meetings to first understand how these bylaws work, how they were affecting us in the past, and how they will continue to affect services. Make sure that we are not being looked at as afterthought after these policies are being already implemented, and we can like get a saying before that. And there are like concerns with the advocacy work that equity seeking services do are directly towards marginalized groups, and not all the projects are necessarily going to be beneficial for all students, but they are important to protect the marginalized group. So I think services will really appreciate the opportunity to have some guarantee that we will be able to continue with the advocacy projects that are specific for marginalized groups, I guess.
Thanks, Midas, and appreciate your feedback. Next is Nicholas.
Hey, everybody. I'm just a bit frustrated at the moment that we seem to be having a lot of general meetings to continue to push back these bylaws, which seems like in many ways it's pointing that maybe there's less popular support than you think you may have for them. I don't think anyone here is under the assumption that WUSA is a perfectly functional system, but this implementation of a governance model in which we're putting a lot of trust into a fairly limited number of people. Again, this runs counter to trying to have a system that counterbalances itself and prevents a concentration of power. We can hope for the best with executives, and you guys have done an excellent job, but there's no guarantee. Like, if we look to other examples where governance has gone wrong, it's often cases where we're seeing power concentration, and it might have been an assumption that people were doing fine in the past, but students make mistakes. Ryerson was totally gutted. Like, we can't just have this hope and trust in so few individuals without genuine oversight. I mean, we can point towards assumption of democratic election and that there is oversight through these general meetings in council, but in reality, I think we all know that there's relatively little engagement, and trying to just reduce the size of all of our structures is not a way of asserting that there is somehow more presence. I think in many ways we're dealing with a largely cosmetic issue by trying to gut it entirely. So we're not just stripping the paint off and giving it a new fresh coat. This is trying to disassemble the chair entirely, even though it was fine, and now we're replacing it with a beanbag. It seems so nonsensical, and it's been frustrating to deal with this process and see what seems like constant backpedaling. It's just been an unfortunate event in total.
Thanks, Nicholas. So again, I will directly respond because this is in regards to like a presentation which I've just given. And I think
that was not a question.
Okay. Nevertheless, I think it is fair for me to respond, given that the statement was given in response to a presentation I've just given. So I'll just say that the reason that the bylaws are not being considered for approval at this meeting is because the board and council take very seriously our responsibility to do our due diligence, and as you say, like these are very significant changes, and it's important that we consider them with the weight they hold, and I think I disagree with the characterization that it's evidence of the lack of popular support, and I think that the notion that there, like, a board which is elected annually, if there are such egregious like actions being taken by that board, then the membership will vote them out. Like I think it clarifies the accountability, and you know, it removes a lot of like the executional like authority that the executive team holds presently by institutionalizing it in staff and clarifying the role of the board at setting the direction of the organization in the long run. So next is Abra.
Thank you. So yeah, I'm sort of adding on to next point over here, but so firstly, I'd like to preface this by that I'm not giving a value judgment on whether I think this is a popular move or not, or whether I think it's a good move or not, for that matter. My bigger concern has just been that we have been addressing this through general meetings, and I understand that the reason for this is that a GM is if I correct me if I'm wrong, but I understand that a GM is more binding than a referendum is to WUSA. But the issue is that GMs are attended by the same group of people every time. A large portion of the undergraduate body isn't even necessarily aware of what's happening at these GMs, and even fewer are like actively actively following what the council is doing. So at this point, if this is a popular move or not is only supported by the fact that this is popular among the politically active members of this association, and I'm not sure if that's a good indicator of what the undergraduate body thinks of it.
Thanks, Abhiraj. We'll go to Edward next.
Yeah, I just want to voice my support for this governance review. I think with the journal meetings we've had, we've been trying to take it slow from my perspective of making sure that we give students as much opportunity as they have to do input. We've had one special journal meeting already, and we'll be having another one to formally approve these bylaws. We've had meetings with each of the faculty societies, I believe. The executives going to talk about this. We've had numerous council meetings. I know that myself as a counselor and a number of other counselors have been doing quite a lot of outreach with students to try and get their thoughts and opinions. And at the end of the day, I think we've exhausted pretty much every option we have to engage with students. We've sent out emails, we've done social media, we've done direct engagement, and other engagements through societies. It's at a point there is diminishing returns, and I think at this point the students who have strong opinions have made it very clear and found ways to make them heard. And I don't think at this point it's really a question of not knowing if there's strong support or not. I think we have very clearly outlined there is strong support for parts of this governance review, and there are also concerns with it. But on the whole, there is a strong agreement from from students that this is a change that WUSA needs to be making.
Thanks, Edward. Next is Nicholas.
Sorry, I think that's better. I think to Edward's point, I'm a bit disappointed with. Edward was present, to my knowledge, at some of the meetings which occurred between the engineering society itself, and it was largely panned and considered to be disliked by the straw polls that I saw ongoing. I feel like in many ways we're relying a little bit too much on council here. We don't really, in my opinion, I don't think that council or board alone really should be given the choice, especially on the election model, or whether or not there should be reforms at all. This should really have been delegated to the assembly in general, as opposed to largely being operated at a higher level without as much input from students. I know that technically they could have attended, but when you have representation, there's little motivation from an individual perspective to get out there and actually voice your concerns. We're relying too much here on those who are already familiar with the systems to make decisions on behalf of their constituents without proper and true consultation. I mean, it's unfortunate, and I don't think it accurately represents the reality, especially when, at least with the engineering perspective in mind, the representation on the engineering council was counter to that we see at the council here today, or sorry, council from previous weeks.
Thanks, Nicholas. Next is Catherine.
Hello. I feel like this steps into the territory of like a discussion about the philosophy of representative democracy, where yes, it's true that a lot of trust has been given to council to make decisions on behalf of the student body about these bylaws and the governance review in general, but that's because they are elected to represent their constituents. Council meets every month and often more frequently than that to discuss everything that comes up, and it would be impractical if every single thing that came up to council was distributed to all members as a referendum, essentially. The reason why we elect councillors to represent us in council is because that way they can become familiar with the system. The whole point of having people familiar with the system is so that they can make informed decisions on our behalf that sometimes as individuals we disagree with, but that's how that's how this works. There is no sustainable alternative, I'd argue, because council is meant to be a relatively representative sample of the student body, which through the course of a year becomes qualified to make informed decisions. If you stopped 1,000 students on Ring Road to ask them the governance review, they don't have an hour to listen to then explain the intricacies of it. And we don't want to necessarily be burdening students with having to understand the intricacies of this change, which is meant to simplify the system so that it can be understood more intuitively. I don't think it's fair to criticize the fact that we have been approaching the elected representatives of our members to inform the decision-making process. I just don't think that that's a fair criticism to make right now, but I appreciate that you have engaged with the process throughout, and I do think that that's something that you very much have the right to be doing as a member. That's all.
Thanks, Catherine. So I'll say I fear this might become a circular discussion. So during Alora's speaking turn, until the end of Alora's speaking turn, you will have the opportunity to raise your hand, and after that, I will cut off discussion about this to spare us the time. So Alora, please go ahead.
Thank you. First off, I want to say thanks, Nick, for expressing your comments. It's definitely important to have views on both sides of the issue, and I know you do a lot of hard work and advocacy, and I, as an engineering student, greatly appreciate the work you do and the interest you take and the hours you spend trying to understand this governance process. So thank you for your comments. I do also want to say, right, like in our Canadian democracy, when an election is run, it's not run by the officials who are the elected officials, it's run by an impartial third body, and the person who sets that up actually cannot vote to make sure that it is impartial in all ways. So I definitely see that there is a benefit to what you say. And, you know, the idea of having more people instead of less, if we have less student engagement, as has been sort of talked about, right? Like, often students don't have time to sort of understand the intricacies of WUSA governance. If there's fewer students engaging externally, if we have more students engaging internally, then we have a broader student perspective any way you slice it. So I just want to say thanks, Nick. Definitely some good points you raised there.
Thanks, Alora. Next is Abby.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I'm sick, so if you can't hear me at all, let me know. I did want to just say that with council and the board, a lot of the decisions that are being made are being done in the best interest of the student body and in the best interest of the organization for like long-term sustainability. So something that could be really, really popular might not be in the best interest of the organization in the long term. We're talking about creating a system that will be able to support students well past when we're here. It's not about just us, it's about the students who come in 2, 5, 10 years. We want to make sure that we have a student association that works for us and then continues working for students. And I think if we're electing students to understand that and make decisions based on that, then they are the appropriate people to be consulting while still making sure that we do give students opportunities to speak like we have here at the general meeting. So I just kind of wanted to add in my 2 cents there.
Thanks, Abby. So Jay will be the last to speak to this, since those are the hands that are up right now. So next is Nicholas.
Thank you. I think it's important to consider this in light, well, obviously in a philosophical light, there's not much value in just harshing over legalese. I think in many ways we need to consider that this is much more than just a normal motion. This isn't just asking a representative democracy to discuss procedure. We're instead much more debating a move from a fairly true to form representative democracy to what it surmounts to an elected oligarchy. We're kind of also experiencing a conflict of interest here, where we're moving additionally from a case where we have student leadership and to asking it to form a new structure where student leadership is not only sees its power concentrated, but also pay increases and distribution across the board. Our duty should really never be to the organization, but we really much more need to be considering the interests of students, which are, I repeat, not aligned with those of WUSA itself in a strict basis.
Mahir.
Hello. I just had a quick question. You brought up a point, I think, Catherine, that that the changes were made to simplify the process for the student body. Just from my own understanding, I feel like regardless of the structure, the nature, or the opinions. The old system, I would argue, the election system of electing members is more clear in the old system than the new one. I wasn't really able to follow along with the whole idea of a faculty guarantee. It took me listening to it a few times to fully understand. So I feel like that adds a complication to the election system that uh, sort of kind of derails the objective of making it more simpler for the students. So I feel like we could be complicating things by trying to simplify, if that makes sense.
Thanks. Next is Abhiraj.
Thank you, Ben. So yeah, first off, again, I'm not making points for or against this review. Others have done that, and others have done that well for both sides. My bigger concern is that the way this decision is being made, it seems like it's being made in a way that a large portion of the undergraduate student body is not fully aware of what's happening. This is a decision that is largely being made by councillors, board members, and a few, and even at the GM, only the few at-large members who've been politically active or aware of this. And I'm not sure that is a good way to go ahead with this, especially because a big problem with our at this university has been that there hasn't been political engagement. There's to some extent an apathy towards WUSA and like the governance structure, and the I and if a decision is made keeping without like taking into account how students feel, how without actively making sure that students can be a part of the decision, which in my opinion a general meeting is not good enough, because uh, with uh, with so many students being inactive at a political level that they do not attend these meetings, and maybe a referendum would be a better idea. Maybe having a town hall would be a better idea. Maybe something where students can actually engage would be important. I don't know what the best way is, but like without actively making sure that students can engage with this decision, I feel we're feeding into that apathy towards student government, and I think that is a problematic way to follow to make such a major governance decision.
Thanks, Abhiraj. Next is Jay, and actually finally will be Jay.
Yeah. Actually, I want to echo Abhiraj's point. Look at this general meeting. It's an annual general meeting, and we only have like 52 students attending unit today. As a counselor, I feel like I'm fully understand what are we doing right now for the governing review, but we have like 30,000 undergrad students, and only like maybe students attending meeting today know what are we doing now. The large number of students have no idea what are we doing. This is like a major governing changes, and I think like more students should be involved in the decision making. Like in Ben's presentation, he only used like 20 minutes to explain what are we doing and what are our choices. I think it's not a very complex thing for students to understand. So they don't need to like spend like a few hours to read those documents. They only need to like to read through your presentation. It is very clear. What are we now? And what are our options? What is option A? What is option B? It is very clear, well written on your presentation. Thus, I think more students should be involved to make this decision, and maybe a referendum is a better choice at this point. Thank you.
Thanks, Jay. And I'll just clarify for the members present that in order to affect a bylaw change, like a referendum cannot affect a bylaw change. The legal requirement outlined in our bylaws and in the Ontario Nonprofit Corporations Act, so that bylaw changes need to be confirmed by the member. Well, actually, it's in our bylaws, not in the legislation. Is that bylaw changes do need to be affected by a general meeting, for better or for worse. And I appreciate your engagement with this issue. And if you have any questions, feel free to email me or talk to your counselors, etc. That brings us to the Society's proposal on compulsory fee assessment, which I'll read the motion, though we won't be able to vote on it because we've yet to reach quorum. Nevertheless, we can discuss it. Whereas society fees were historically assessed on an opt-out basis, whereby payment was compulsory on quest and refunds were sought at the respective society office. And whereas the engineering and mathematics societies have, through democratic means, expressed a desire to assess their respective fees on an opt-out basis, then be it resolved that the general meeting call on the university to honor democratic decision-making by students by permitting societies to change their fees compulsorily or optionally. Anybody wish to speak to this motion? Oh, Naman, your hand disappeared. I don't know if that was me on accident. I was trying to allow your mic, but I might have hit the wrong thing. Let me find your name. Allow mic. You should be able to unmute now.
Hello, yes. So I think this is broadly a good thing. For context, I am a MathSoc counselor. The biggest problem that I see with people is that they go to MathSoc events and they realize that they haven't paid the MathSoc fee. They just like uncheck all the checkboxes and then they realize they haven't paid the MathSoc fee and they can't get free pie. And then, you know, it's just a bad day for everyone, right? We want to not have bad days for everyone. And I think this is like a good compromise in that if someone is really opposed to us, they can still, you know, come to us and opt out. But the default is that everyone is included, and the default is that everyone can get the services that everyone else around them is getting. So, yeah.
Thanks. Next is Carson, who I shall allow to use their mic.
Hi, everyone. I am the Engineering Society B president. This has been something that the Engineering Society has been kind of fighting on for a long time. We have brought this to the university in a few different manners and have been shut down for unsatisfactory reasons. And so having this come through WUSA is important to have another level of support. The Engineering Society has been struggling to run all of its big ticket events, especially due to a large opt-out rate. And there has been a large amount of those opt-outs have been almost by accident, for lack of a better term, of just checking through the boxes and not really sure what they're opting out to. We totally agree that being able to receive a refund if you do not agree to what we are doing in NSOC, or if you are not explicitly using any of our services, that is important to have. And also just making sure that we can make the decision on how our fee is run is important. Thank you.
Thanks, Carson. Next is Vincent.
Hi. Yes, yeah, for context, I'm the MassLoc VPA and a WUSA counselor. When MassLoc decided that we wanted to go back to the refund model, I think first of all, I think compulsory fee assessment is kind of a misnomer. The more accurate term is the refund model. And when MassLoc decided we wanted to go back to the refund model, this was passed. If I remember right, it was unanimously at a general meeting. All students were able to attend and vote. And the refund model, the way it works is, everyone pays the fee by default. If you, don't want to pay it, then you can ask for a refund, but it only is granted if you're not using, any of the society's resources. So, you can't. So if you, say I want a refund, we'll give it to you at the end of the term if you go through the whole term without using any of the society's resources. But if you're using MassLoc's resources, obviously it doesn't make sense that you should be able to get out of paying the MassLoc fee. This also, this also just helps the societies reduce the amount that they need to spend. Have to spend a lot of wasted time and resources on enforcing whether or not people pay their fee right now. It would be so much simpler if all that we had to do was, tap a walk card, and at the end of the term, and when you tap your walk card, we make a record that you attended the event or used the service or whatever. At the end of the term, if you're not in the list of people who went to any of our events or used any of our services that term, then you get the refund. If you requested it, and if you requested a refund and then you use MassLoc services, then you don't get it. I think it's a much more simple and fair method for students. All it means is you get what's the MassLoc fee, something like $14. Maybe you get your $14 a couple months later, but I think generally it's in the interest of students because it simplifies things so much. And one of the things that we see all the time in MassLoc, especially first years who, are confused, not, kind of what the last speaker was saying, who don't know what they're opting out of when they, check through the boxes. And by just, setting it up this way, it's just so much better for students.
Thanks, Vincent. Does anybody else wish to speak to this? Okay. I'll just add that the Committee of Presidents has been doing some advocacy on this area, as sort of alluded to, I think, by Carson. So yeah, and that work will continue. And I think that many of the societies agree with the principle to have a refund model. And I'll let Abraj go.
Thank you. Yeah, so my point was that people have already made good points as to why we want to move to a refund model, like our societies particularly. But more importantly, it's also the fact that our societies have, as the motion reads, that we have, through our democratic processes that our societies bylaws allow for, have expressed that this is what we want to do, and yeah, the bigger issue here is not just why we want to do it, but the fact that this is a democratic decision that we've made as a society, that this is what we want to do, which is why I feel like the bigger issue is the fact that our society's bylaws and our that we should have more that democratic decision making should not be stopped because of without just cause.
Thanks, Abhiraj. Seeing no further speaker list, people wanting to talk, words, we go to item number 7, which is a member proposal on support for Ukrainian students. So the general meeting will discuss how WUSA can support Ukrainian students at the university in light of the Russian invasion of that country and the ongoing humanitarian crisis there. So any member wish to speak to this? Nicholas?
Hey, everybody. First, before we even get that far in, I will remind the Assembly of the financial support that the university is offering to students currently engaged in any sort of crisis, not just in Ukraine, but especially after the tripartite agreement on the crisis in Ukraine. So before we even get started on this, just making it clear that the university has already passed stances in support of Ukrainian students, so that if we as a student body wish to show our support, the faculty and the administration are already with us on this.
Thanks, Nicholas. Next is Naman.
Hello. So I would like to point out that similar things have happened in the past at WUSA, and they have had similar outcomes in that we tend to, as students, we tend to want less involvement in international issues. This is what happened during the Indian farmers' protests. This is what happened during the whole Israel and Palestine thing. This is what happened during Black Lives Matter. I think the consensus is that we don't want to like put our noses where they don't belong as to supporting the students here. I think that's definitely a great idea. As Nicholas pointed out, there are supports available on campus at the moment. I think the best thing we can do is probably just like point the students who need the supports to the supports, and yeah.
Thanks, Naman. Next is Abhiraj.
Thank you, Anne. So I would have to disagree with Naman over here. I mean, of course, like we need to even discuss this, we need to know what the university is already doing. Only then can we see what else we would want to advocate for, or what WUSA can do. But the bigger concern is this is something which is likely distressing a lot of students at the university. There are mental health concerns. People have family back in Ukraine, and a lot of things. So they definitely do need support. And as a student association, WUSA should be supporting them. So which and if they need specific support because of the ongoing humanitarian crisis, I think it is important to discuss how we can do so. But first, we need to know like what supports are already there in place, just so that we can see what is additionally needed.
Thanks, Abhiraj. Seeing no further discussion on the member proposal on support for Ukrainian students, Vincent.
Yeah, I guess I disagree with Naman. I think the situation is a bit different in that I think there are very few people who would be against supporting Ukraine in principle. I guess my main question is like, like what, I don't really see what WUSA can do other than like, put out a statement in support, like, and I'm not sure if, I don't know if students will see that as helpful or if students will just see that as just kind of like, false words with no action behind them. I'm not really sure, how that would be perceived by students. If there are any students here who, are affected by the conflict, I'd be interested in hearing their perspectives.
Thanks. Next is Nicholas.
Thank you, Ben. I think I disagree with Vincent here on the number of students that would actually find it a problem to pick a side on geopolitical issues. It's quite rampant in my experience with clubs, especially. I've encountered a number of what seemed like fairly uncontroversial issues that have caused quite the kickback. And at the club level, there's a lot more involvement and hardline stances that are taken. And I actually don't see it necessarily as a problem for WUSA to pick a side if it is the side that the majority of the student population holds. I find it a bit disappointing that we haven't in the past, but I don't think that there is not an opportunity to change. And going into the future, WUSA trying to stand up for marginalized and equity-seeking groups around the world as they deal with trying to create a more equitable and more justice-oriented world for all.
Thanks. Next is Edward.
Yeah, so I guess in principle I do agree with the idea of we should be doing everything for students, especially as they face their own conflicts, and there is definitely a lot of impacts this is having on people in Canada, even directly and indirectly. That said, as a matter of overall principle, I think WUSA has, in these types of cases, always tended to err on the side of giving our supports where we can, but not stepping too far out and making outlandish claims of, we can have a strong impact on this, whereas we know what we do best, and that is supporting students through whatever situations they're in. And I'm just overall concerned about the fact that I don't like to use a slippery slope argument, but this is really just what happens a lot of times, is that once we open a door to these kinds of stances at a WUSA level, it gets pointed back to for other issues. I know that, whatever happened in the world in the future, if this kind of thing is taken, stances taken now, later on it's going to get pointed to as another example of what we did. And as much as I agree with the idea of we should be supporting the Ukrainian government and what they're doing to oppose their invasion, it is a dicey situation for WUSA to try and put themselves in generally in any geopolitical situation like this, and I would be hesitant to go so far as to adopt a formal motion on this.
Thanks, Edward. Next is Abiraj.
Thank you, Ben. So I just want to point out that I disagree that we can do nothing beyond just issuing a statement. I mean, issuing a statement is also helpful in that it shows that we support the students, but I feel like there are things we can do, more mental health engagement, advocacy to the university for academic relief where needed because of mental health reasons, and these are just things which I can think of like off the top of my head, like people who are actually facing the issues right now, actually like Ukrainian students. I think they consulting with them, like counselors or leadership, or even assign someone to consult with them and see what they think we can do, what they are expecting would be I think the best move at this point to, and then see what is feasible and how we can help them out. But in general, yeah, I disagree that we're limited to issuing a statement or just saying words, because there's definitely things that can be done. Just reiterating the ones which came to my mind, which were increased mental health support and advocating for academic relief. And the third thing is just consulting with them to see what else is expected of the association. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is Naaman.
Yeah, I feel like my points were mildly misunderstood, but I basically agree with whatever has been said by Matthew in the chat and Edward out loud, and that yeah, there's not much we can do without beyond issuing a statement. You know, I would like to say that Abhiraj's idea of increased mental health supports and exam relief sounds great. I feel like that should just exist in general, not just in response to this conflict. So yeah, I would like to see those supports increase in general. It's just like not, you know, this special case thing. As for taking stances on geopolitical issues, I think Matthew also said it really well in the chat, where we should do the things we can rather than taking this why not approach, because yeah, this situation might seem pretty cut and dry, but future situations might not be so cut and dry. And in future situations, you know, then you're looking at precedent and you are thinking, hey, we did this back then, should we do this again? And now you're stuck. So yeah.
Thanks. And I'll just say any comments made in the chat are not on the record. I am not reading the chat. If you have something you want to say to the assembly, please raise your hand. And Rami, go ahead, please.
All right, thank you. So I'm pretty new to these general meetings. I'm not sure how things go. So regarding this current the proposal about the support for Ukrainian students, just had a few questions. I guess just want to confirm some stuff. So like, is this proposal like calling for, you know, like obviously, I assume like most people would, or everyone really would support obviously the Ukraine here in this situation. Like, are we saying issuing a statement condemning the Russian invasion and supporting Ukraine in this sense? Like, are we taking a stance, like a political stance here? If someone could confirm that, I just wanted to understand if that's going, because if so, I just, you know, previously I have not seen WUSA do this kind of thing, although I do support us like WUSA doing this. So for example, you know, last year, you know, last May actually, when the Israel-Palestine conflict happened, there was a clear, you know, oppressor and a clear like oppressed here. So I like, why? Because last time WUSA did not like issue a, for example, they did not like, it wasn't a clear statement of condemning one side and supporting one side. It was just, yeah, we issue a clear support for all students affected by this. So when we are doing this here, if you do issue a statement supporting Ukraine or so on, in the future when other issues happen, are we going to take a side like on this? Like, as I mentioned last year, you know, 80 plus Palestinian children did not die because there wasn't a clear oppressor or oppressed. There obviously was. So I'm just, you know, wondering, I guess, about this. I'm not sure if I made myself clear, so sorry about that, but yeah.
No, thank you for your comments, Rami. So to address your question, like logistical questions, so the meeting has not reached quorum, so there won't be any decisions taken arising from this discussion.
Yeah.
Traditionally, a general meeting could pass like a motion of support, or like some sort of stance. And I guess I'll leave the general comments about the implications of supporting a side in a conflict for other members to address in their comments. So thank you. And next is Cannon, who I shall allow to go.
Hello, folks. I'll try and keep it brief and short. I think there have been a lot of points said by people here, but from my understanding, the item on the agenda is how we can help students here right now. There's no motion on the floor about taking a stance or something similar to that. I think we should focus on what other resources we can provide to those students, not just Ukrainian or Russian in general. I know in the past when we had talked about the farmers' protest at Students' Council, the final motion was something along the lines of we are here to support every student who is being impacted by this entire event, and we will here we will be resharing resources, and we will also be in general just making sure that the university is considering these special circumstances when students are asking for accommodations. I think that is something similar to that we can do here. We have a good precedence to go around about here, and that's all I was gonna say, because I think we're just talking a lot about taking a stance, but not really actually talking about things we can do right now to help these students.
Thanks. Next is Midas.
Hi. I want to support Canon and Approach point about the stand. From where I'm standing, it's a little bit sad that we are talking about taking standards and think about how it will affect how WUSA didn't take a stand before and how it's going to move forward and take a stand. Or while the important thing is for us to support, and the first step is to know what are the supports that are available. Accessibility services already give out some accommodation and letter to directly request from professors to provide accommodation for students. So that is something that university already is doing. Something that WUSA can do is to move forward with the other options that can be talking about how counseling service only offers 6 sessions and how we can make sure that students who are affected by Ukrainian and Russia war or other similar things that are still happening, but maybe not in the mainstream as much, can access more sessions with counseling service. Yeah, those are some action points that we can take instead of just talking about stands. Maybe we can just forget about taking stands and focus on piling a list of support and also demands from university and different part of university to provide more.
Thank you. Next is Nicholas.
Thank you, Ben. I think I wanted to echo Ralmi's statement there earlier, where I think we're a bit too fearful of creating a slippery slope, but the slippery slope argument in itself assumes that the line will never stop, ever. I don't think that is as much a concern, and I think that when we have issues that are so widely supported by the student population, we should do our best job as a collective to support that vast majority opinion, and not only make resources available, but also show support through our words, not just our actions. There's plenty of room to change. I hope that this could be an inspiration for other similar issues worldwide that WUSA should take a moral stance on. As I said in the chat, and I think can be a bit of a concise way of putting it, is that I worry that driving in the middle of the lane will only set us up to be hit by both sides.
Thank you. Next is Abhiraj.
Thank you, Ben. So yeah, I just want to but I feel like people have already talked about this, but I want to reiterate this, that taking a stance is not taking a stance because we haven't done so in the past is not a good enough argument in my opinion, because because does that mean that we should have taken a stance before, or does that mean we should never take a stance to support students? So in that sense, I do believe that there's nothing wrong with taking a stance now. There was something wrong when we did not take a stance in earlier crises, and The other thing about, how that the motion reads that how we can support them, and it's not about taking a stance. In that, I believe taking a stance is part of the support. It's definitely done alone. It's not enough, but it is part of the support, and that it signals to the students in question that WUSA supports them and the WUSA is looking to help them, which is why I do believe taking a stance as well within the uh, domain of this motion. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is Andre. Go ahead.
Thank you. I would like to echo the comments that Avaraj made, and I do say this as a Ukrainian Canadian student myself, that I think it is really imperative that WUSA is taking actions to show support, and one of those actions is very much taking a stance and letting students know that we are supported. And I would also like to echo the comments that Midas made about how I feel like this does really point out that there are glaring issues in the available services to students. We do have, accommodations that can be given during crises like this, but often, they are not very well done, and questions are being asked that shouldn't be asked. Like I myself have received a lot of inappropriate questions about my family and about my views from, students and administrators alike. And I think that it is really imperative that the university, WUSA specifically, does take a formal stance in show of support of students and of Ukraine, and that we also follow that up with, how we should be speaking to students who are impacted by this.
Thank you. So next will be Jay, and I'll say, I think this is perhaps getting a little circular. So if you wish to speak to this, please raise your hand during Jay's speaking turn, and at the end of it, that will be the end of our speaking list. So go ahead, Jay.
Okay, thanks. I'll be really quick. I think there are more than one conflict ongoing on our planet right now. If we are going to take a stance for a specific conflict, then we probably should take stance on all conflicts, because we don't want left anyone behind, right? Yeah, thanks.
Thanks, Jay. So finally will be Rami.
All right, thank you. I'll just make this sweet and simple, I guess, short and simple. So yeah, I do support WUSA taking a stance on this. We've seen there's a clear oppressor and oppressed, so it just makes sense to do so. When there is a clear oppressor and someone who's oppressed, like we see in this situation, not taking a stance means kind of you've effectively taking this, you've effectively supported the oppressor. So, and I'll just echo some of the stuff that has been said in chat. Where it was mentioned, not taking a stance in the past is no reason not to take one now. So yes, I do support that. But I'm just, once we are doing this now, starting from now, I would like to see us do it in future, which hopefully we do not have any future conflicts, but I just hope to see that also in the future, and echo other stuff some people have said, about the resources and the availability of these resources, and hopefully we could just get more of those, I guess. And yeah, that's all for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Rami. Thank you everybody for their contributions to this discussion. So as I've said a couple times, we have not reached quorum, so this meeting is not technically in order. We are unable to pass a motion on this. However, I do think I will say the questions about the philosophy of how we decide whether or not we take stances on geopolitical issues and the scope of what we do is very critical questions to what this association is about and what we value. So that brings us to item number 8, which is a member proposal on a campus goose statue, where the general meeting will discuss a proposal to install a goose statue on main campus. So would anybody, I see Vincent has a hand up.
Just before I start speaking, I'm just wondering, how close are we to quorum, and can people like please just like try to get like 1 or 2 friends to join, because I think we're like 10 away from reaching quorum.
Thanks, Vincent. I'll ask Mike to provide us a quorum count, and I'll reiterate, I am not reading the chat. If there are questions that require the attention of the chair, please make it known. Otherwise,
we're sitting at 87 people.
That would be 13 shy, rather. Okay, so next is Rami.
Yep, thanks. So, goose statue, I guess I only have one thing to say. Honk. I don't know. Yeah, let's do it. I hope to see it.
Next is Nicholas.
Can I motion for a 5-minute recess to try and give some people some time to go to the washroom and maybe ping friends?
So sorry, computing, loading. I mean, we can't make motions because we are not in order. We can put the meeting on a pause until let's say 10 to 7, the hard start. So it'd be just under 7 minutes.
That would be 20 minutes from the time that I think you mean. Do you mean 10 after 7?
7:10. Did I not say?
You said
You
10
said,
before 7.
7. You said 10 to 7. It
7:10.
was a verbal typo.
7:10 p.m. Okay. Bye.
HelloFresh recipes aren't just easy to cook, they're extra delicious too. Order your first box now and get up to 16 meals.
Thank you, Catherine.
You're welcome. Reddit is giving me instructions. I proceed now to order HelloFresh.
All right, who hasn't gotten friends to join yet?
All my friends are here.
I know.
Sorry. No sounds from you, Matthew. Maybe that's what the egg statue is. It's been in the process of hatching for so long. I'm sure if we just give it a few more years, we will have goose.
How much does a goose statue cost?
Probably several tens of thousands of dollars.
Can we make the university pay for it?
We cannot make the university do anything. Matthew, plug in your thing and take it out again or something.
Can we, like, pressure the university into paying for it? Okay, I'm bored and we don't have quorum, so I'm gonna say my stupid idea. I think that WUSA should refuse to recognize the warrior as the mascot of the university. We should only recognize like Mr. Goose as the mascot. We should, refer to like the sports team as like the Waterloo Gooses. Gooses sounds funnier than geese. We should like open all our emails to students with like hello gooses and just like do like a coordinated campaign to undermine the university's marketing around King Warrior so that, no one knows what King Warrior is, and the university has no choice but to change the mascot to the goose because that's the only things that students recognize. It's going to be like a multi-year like disinformation campaign, like refusing to acknowledge what the official mascot of the university is. But I think if we can pull it off, then the university will have no choice but to make their mascot a goose, and then we can try to get them to pay for the statue.
I think that's a huge wastage of money and resources.
No, it doesn't take much money. All we do is instruct marketing to like replace like the word like warrior with goose in all communications.
No,
That's
it's
it.
like us keep fighting university on this, and then university still using their own marketing.
You just use a find and replace statement. No change in any of the iconography.
Hey, it's
just
not
switch
just
the
a
word
statement,
lion
it's
for
about
goose.
logos. It's about posters that they make. It's about the what's it called? The costume the person wears during events. It's
We
all
just
about
don't
that.
acknowledge
It's for
that,
Waterloo.
that
It's
King
for-
Warrior is
yeah.
a lion.
Any
It's just a weird shaped goose every month.
That works too. I think
I
all we
think
have
that
to do
there
is like
no
make like
reason
one
to
or two
burn our relationship
logos.
with athletics over this.
What? All we have to do is like make like one or two logos that will just like replace like whenever we're posting something from the university with a warrior, we'll just like replace it with like a goose logo instead. Yeah, just like some fine replace. We'll just have some like images that you can like slap on, like just like an image, just like a PNG of the word goose, and then you just like stretch it over to cover the word warrior if we ever like post any images from the university. Yeah, I don't think it would take much resources.
What if a geese attacked a student and traumatized them enough?
This has happened before. I don't see the issue.
Now they don't feel comfortable being on campus with goose statues.
My girlfriend was attacked by a goose twice, and she still loves gooses.
Yes, but like maybe they were not traumatized.
I don't know. She's like bitten as a child by a wild animal, and she's fine. So I think you're overestimating the risk of people getting traumatized.
I think that this is a tremendous waste of our time and energy when it comes to our relationship with athletics. I am very pro goose. I love the goose, but to be honest with you, there's a degree to which that I think that would kind of ruin it, having it be institutionalized. I like that WUSA gets to treat it as a goose, and we get to do all of our goose stuff, and Reddit does it, all that stuff. I feel like it kind of ruins it if you've got the old people at athletics, hello kidsing the goose.
I know. I think it looks like we almost have 100 people. I think we can let the people decide.
I am very pro goose statue, and even if we don't get quorum, I think we can definitely bring this to council. I think goose statue is a lot of fun. I am not pro pretending that athletics doesn't have the logo that it has. I think it is a waste of our time and shedding political capital at the university on things that we could do more important things with.
What political capital? Just a memo to our marketing staff.
It's going to piss the university off
a lot. That's fine.
Thing.
If they want us to stop, then they can recognize the motion that council passed in 2018 that the official mascot of the university should be changed to a goose.
Instead of a statue, you can do the there's a UW sign, like the one in the rocks. You just do a goose sign right in the rocks. Just so you can see it from the sky. That's the purpose of it. All the aviation students will take pictures.
I think that we want a goose statue that is like a goose when it's about to be taking off, so its arms are like outstretched, and it's got to be pretty large, like about at least 6 feet, just for size, so that you can stand around it and take photos in its arms.
6 feet tall?
Yes, at least 6 feet tall, so that the average person is a little bit shorter than it. That way, you're kind of like enveloped in its arms as you kind of stand there. A great place for grad photos, admission photos, just anything really.
I think it should be more.
Right down on the corner of the SLC green.
It should be more than 6 feet. I shouldn't be the same height.
Yeah, I would think maybe 6 feet, maybe 7 to 8 for sizing, but
7, 8. But like the wings will be spread, so like way more than 6 feet.
We now have quorum, Ben.
Very well. Okay.
So do we go back and vote on everything quickly?
Well, the meeting will come to order at 7:10 p.m.
Sorry, Ben. There are only like 95 people in the participants from what I can see.
Proxies.
Oh.
We're like
So-
teetering on 100.
Is that we're over 100? 100 or more?
Well, when I told you attendees list was 90, now it has dropped to 88. So I'm just waiting for it to go back. I'm waiting on 2 more people.
Can we immediately suspend the quorum requirement once we hit quorum?
No.
Ben, you did call to order. But
Oh yeah, that means we have quorum. You call to order.
I think
can
that also
start.
means we all shut up.
Well, I think this means that we proceed to the start of the agenda. I'm in the chair. We've come to order at 7:10 p.m. We have done the territorial acknowledgement before coming to order. There is approval of the agenda. Resolve the general meeting approve the agenda as presented. Is there somebody who would like to make that motion? Vincent moves. Is there a second? Steph seconds. Vincent, would you like to speak to the motion to approve the agenda?
I was wondering if we can like immediately accept motions 4 and 6, since we already talked about those and it seemed there was no objections. Like, can we take those on consent?
So I'll say my intent was that we would just do that we wouldn't relitigate, but we could go through those decisions. If you wish, you can move to have a consent agenda formed of the items which we have discussed already. So that would be the motions that are on. So that would be to have the motion under item 4, item 6 approved as they're presented as single vote.
If that's faster, then yes.
Okay. Is there a second to the motion to consider a single vote on all of the items which we've considered, the motions that we had not been able to consider? So I see Catherine raising a hand on camera, so I'll take that to be a second. So Vincent, would you like to speak to the amendment now on the motion to approve the agenda?
I think we talked about this before reaching quorum. No one seemed against accepting the audit or the society proposal on returning to the refund model for societies who democratically chose to do so. In the interest of time, let's not go through them again.
Very well. Does anybody else wish to speak to the motion to amend the agenda to form a consent agenda as described? Nicholas?
I mean, I could contest the idea of a consent agenda in the first place, though I think it's maybe worthwhile to amend a motion to the agenda before we continue so that we lengthen the adjournment slightly.
That will, I won't consider that right now because that's amending an amendment. We should decide on the question of a consent agenda first.
Sorry, I was trying to make that clear. Before we move to vote on the agenda itself, I would have the assembly consider whether or not they think we can get everything done in 45 minutes.
Very well. I'll remind folks that wish to speak right now that we're considering a specific question on voting on all of the items that we've considered already. So if you have a comment about that, speak now. We'll go back before approving the agenda and we can do other considerations, including the adjournment time and other issues that might arise. So Alora, if you have something specifically to considering all of the items that we've dispensed of already as a single motion, you can speak to that now.
I would like to have item number 4, which is approval of the agenda, split from everything else. And I would also like to move the motion I moved back before quorum was reached that we flip items 8 and 9. And I would just like to mention that last time that was considered, there was only time provided for people in opposition to the motion. So I'd also ask that people in support of that motion be allowed to speak.
Okay, so if So right now we're like in the Roberts rules world. We have a motion, which is to approve the agenda. Then below that motion, there's a motion to amend to have items 4 through 6 considered as a single motion to vote to approve them as written. If you have other considerations about the agenda, if you,
the agenda is item 4 though, right? So you couldn't combine that without Riff shuffling it.
So if that is if your position is like as you've described, then you should vote against this motion, because you would not like to have it considered as a single vote.
Okay.
So,
Thank you.
Thanks for bearing with me. Do other people wish to speak to the motion to amend the agenda to have items 4 through 6 considered as a single vote? Ken, would you like to speak?
I was going to say we should probably let people at least have their thoughts on the 6 as a separate thing, because this is a general comment. Like, I would be voting against this motion because I think we've had enough new people join in that we should give them an opportunity to have their thoughts spoken out, because in the past the people who just spoke were in favor. Maybe there are people who might not be in favor of the society's proposal on compulsory fee assessment in general. So people consider that when you're voting on this.
Thank you, Ken. Next is Sahil.
I think in the interest of time, we're rushing it a little bit too much and confusing people. I think you might have misspoken when you, or there was several people that misspoke about item number 4 being the agenda. Item number 4 is not the agenda. Item number 3 is the agenda. And so you can be in favor of combining item 4 and item 6 while still having issues with the agenda. So I just would like to be clear that what are we discussing? Are we discussing skipping those 2 items, or are we discussing the agenda in its entirety?
Thanks, Sahil. So I'll try to clarify again. Right now, there is a motion on the floor. Be it resolved that the general meeting approve the agenda as presented, the document that is listed on the website. There is a motion to amend that motion by combining items 4 through 6 into a single vote. So in like rules of order land, you call that a consent agenda, where you just have a bunch of items for approval that you vote on as a single thing instead of considering the separate items. So right now, the issue of debate, that motion has been moved by Vincent and seconded by Catherine. So right now, the issue that we're debating is whether or not to combine parts of the agenda, items 4 through 6. Once that question is decided, either in favor or against, we will go back to the main question of approving the agenda. This is not I hope that clarifies. And I regret that this procedural trickery is coming at a point where I'm already exhausted. But right now we are considering the question of combining parts of the agenda to a single vote. So if you wish to speak in favor or against that, now is the time to do so. Then we'll go to a vote. And before proceeding, we will go back to the main motion, either amended or not, depending on the result of this particular question. I hope that clarifies issues. Next is Neman.
Yes, I would just like to echo a lot of the discussion in the chat where people joined for the goose statue motion, and I think we should move forward quickly so that we can get to the goose statue motion and we can vote for the goose statue motion. That is all.
Thank you, Neman. Mike.
Can I call the question on the consent agenda?
I would advise against it,
Okay,
given that we've exhausted the speaking list. So we will proceed to a vote on the motion to amend the agenda to combine items 4 through 6 to a single consent agenda. Sorry, 4 through 7. Sorry, the items which we have discussed already. So that would bring us immediately after that vote to item 8. So we'll do voting via raise hand. And Mike, correct me if I'm wrong, but we can like lower hands en masse, right?
Yes, yeah, we can.
So Irene, I will take you as the last person to speak to this before we proceed to a vote. So, now you've lowered your hand. So did you wish to speak, Irene? If so, please raise your hand so I can find your name. Okay. Irene says it was an accident. Sahil, I'm not going to take the hand at this time. We're going to do a vote on the motion to amend the agenda to combine items 4 through 7 into a single vote. The intent of that being that we can proceed immediately to item 8. So those in favor of amending the agenda to combine items 4 through 7 for a single vote, please raise your hand now. And we will wait until 7:23. So you have just over a minute. Mike, are you able to see the number of people without revealing it, but you can see like the total number of raised hands?
Yes.
Thank you. "20 seconds remaining to vote in favor of this motion." Mike, you've recorded the number in favor?
Yes.
Can you lower hands, and we will ask those who oppose the motion to combine items 4 through 7 to a single consent vote. And we will wait until 7:25, so 90 seconds.
Ben, why are we now discussing 7 as part of the items to be against, but we only did 4 to 6 for the 4s?
The motion was to combine the items which have already been discussed. This discussion is not in order. We're in the middle of a vote. So we'll wait until 7:25 before we consider this.
Actually, Ben, the motion was to combine the items that were motions, which is, I think, only 4 and 6, although I guess we can do 5. Yeah. I think it was 4 to 6.
Mike, have you noted the number of people opposed to the motion? But I mean, it's evident at this point that there's the motion as I had understood it was to do a consent vote on all of the items which had previously been considered by the meeting prior to reaching quorum, to allow us to proceed to where we were before we took a pause, which would be to item 8. That would be combining items 4 through 7 inclusive. And I thought that I had stated that before people voted, but evidently there was confusion about that. So we'll do another vote. And if there's
Ben, I was just gonna say, I think the confusion is because people are talking in the chat. So maybe for the duration of the vote, we should ask people not to use the chat.
Okay. So everything that has been discussed since we've come to order will be considered null. We're back to the motion on the floor presently. Lower hands, please, Mike. Okay. We are on item 3 of the agenda. The motion is be it resolved that the general meeting approve the agenda as presented. I believe that this motion has been moved by Vincent and seconded by Catherine, but I could be mistaken. So, who would like to speak to the motion to approve the general meeting agenda as presented? I see Alora's hand in the chat. Please go ahead.
Hello, I would like to speak to the motion, and I would like to motion that we switch the order of items 8 and 9 so that we can discuss both 8 and 9. There is some concern that item 9 may not be reached. If the item switching is not approved, then I would ask that we make a legally binding decision on item 9 if quorum is no longer reached after discussing item 8.
Okay, thanks, Alora. So a motion to allow the meeting to conduct business after having potentially lost quorum will not be in order, because it violates our bylaws. However, I'll give you the opportunity if you want to make a motion to switch items 8 and 9, so we consider item 9 before item 8. That would be in order.
Okay.
Okay, you would like to make that motion. Is there a
like
second? Is there a second to the motion to switch items 8 and 9? I see Sonia. Okay.
Yeah, I second it.
Okay, thank you, Sonia. So now, for the clarity of the members present, we are discussing a motion to switch items 8 and 9 in the order of the agenda. So if you want to speak to whether we should or we should not switch items 8 and 9, now is the opportunity to do so. Any other comments about the items of business on the agenda or ancillary comments, I will cut you off if you start talking about things that are not related to switching 8 and 9. Edward is first.
I know you said this, but can I have a point of information as to the results of the last vote we had? Or the effect of it?
I'll ask Mike to report, but I will remind the assembly that they are not official or binding or indicative of anything, because the whole vote was out of order, essentially.
Okay.
We had 38 in favor and 20 against. The confusion came from Vincent originally posing items 4 to 6, and then halfway through the discussion being about items 4 through 7. So it was stricken.
Okay. However, right now is a motion to switch items 8 and 9. So next is Andre.
I'd like to support the switching of items 8 and 9.
Thank you. Next is Naman.
I will once again remind everyone that a lot of people here are for the goose motion, which is 8. And yeah, if we want to get to goose motion quick, we don't want to switch 8 and 9. Thank you.
Thank you. Some people are okay.
I'm going to be taking mic privileges away from everyone just to keep it consistent. I apologize for that. Just Ben, you will have to unmute one at a time again.
Thanks, Pratik. Okay, so next on the speaking list was Vincent, who I will give mic permission to. Go ahead, please.
I call the question.
Okay. Does anybody second calling the question? Steph, I see, has seconded the motion to call the question. Okay, so for the clarity of the members present, calling the question is like a formality in Robert's rules whereby we will suspend debating this issue and proceed immediately to a vote. In order for a question to be called, it requires 2/3 vote in the affirmative. So the question being called is whether to amend the agenda to switch items 8 and 9. So right now, I will ask you, do you want to continue debating this or not? If you wish to continue debating, I apologize for switching positives and negatives here. If you want to continue debating about this, you will vote against the calling of the question. If you want to proceed immediately to a vote, then you will vote in favor of calling the question. So if you are in favor of calling the question and suspending debate on the motion to amend the agenda and proceeding immediately to voting on it, you raise your hand now, and I will wait until 7:33, and we will count how many people are in favor of calling the question and proceeding immediately to a vote on the motion to amend the agenda.
Ben, if you want to expedite this, we've passed majority.
Okay. Then the motion carries and we have called the question. We proceed now to a vote. If you could lower hands, please. We will proceed now to a vote on the motion to amend the agenda to swap items 8 and 9. So to switch, to consider item 9 before item 8. So if you are in favor of swapping the order as I have described, raise your hand now, and I will wait until 7:34. So you have 40 seconds. So dépêchez-vous. Okay, we have passed 7:34. Mike, could you please tell me how many have voted in favor of the motion to amend the agenda by swapping items 8 and 9?
Seems to be 31.
31 in favor. Okay. So then could you lower hands, Pratik? And we will ask those who wish to vote against the motion to amend the agenda. So to keep the order of the agenda as it has been presented, raise your hand now, and I'll give you until 7:35. Or until such a time as we pass 31 votes, because then it will be clear that the Assembly opposes the motion to amend.
We are at 32 votes.
Thanks, Pratik. So it would appear that the motion fails, and we are back to the main motion, which is to approve the agenda as presented. Does anybody wish to speak to the motion to approve the agenda. I see Sahil's hand, and I'll remind folks that if you wish to address the assembly, please raise your hand. I'm not reading the chat. Go ahead, Sahil.
There needs to be a better way of addressing point of orders, because I believe we are out of order. We called the question with a majority, but I believe a call to question requires a 2/3 majority, and it wasn't clear that we had a 2/3 majority. And furthering that, my actual comment is that we should move a motion to change the end of the meeting past 8 o'clock to approximately 8:30 or 9 p.m.
Thanks, Sahil. I unfortunately conducting this meeting through electronic means requires that we adopt different rules of procedure. So points of order, I don't see a convenient solution for us to address your concern about raising points of order. Mike, can you clarify that the motion to call the question passed with 2/3? I understood that it had.
Apologies, I counted to 55, which is not 2/3. It was just majority.
Okay. I shall be frank that I don't know how we proceed from here, because we appear to have voted down the motion to amend the agenda by way of calling the question. And I think it is fair to say that I don't think further debate on the motion to amend the agenda will change that outcome. And in the interest of time, I think we shall proceed. And I'll welcome a motion to overturn the chair on that ruling. Otherwise, right now we are speaking to the motion to amend the agenda, or to approve the agenda as presented.
I have a point of privilege.
Okay, go ahead, Alora.
I'd like to request how many seconds were given to each side in the vote that was only split by 1?
I don't know.
Ben, can I just answer that?
Go ahead, Cannon.
It was like the vote against the motion, the time given for the vote against the motion was less than the time given to vote in favor of the motion.
Okay, do you have that recording? It was 40 seconds for the vote in favor.
Okay, I'll just say that my basis for giving amounts of time is based on the nearest minute. I'm waiting to the nearest minute. I don't think that there's any provision in Robert's rules or otherwise that we have about the amount of time given to motions.
Okay, I just like to comment a point of privilege that if there was less time given for the first vote, then that impacts the outcome of the vote, especially since there's such little amount of time. But I can see that it was about equal, so that's closed for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Alora. Cannon, would you like to speak to the motion to approve the agenda?
No, but I was wondering if we can shut down the chat, because I think it's gonna.
Yep, I'm about to. I just want to make sure that I have the authority to do so.
I would like to motion, because there's a lot of discussion happening, which might make things not as, which might make things somewhat, I can't remember the word I want to use here, more confrontational than it is good for a meeting to run in that environment.
Thanks, Cannon. And I will agree that I think that the chat is serving more to confuse the business being conducted than to inform it. So I'll ask Pratik to shut down the chat. And if you wish to speak, use the raise hand function in Teams, and you will be called on. All members have the right to speak at this meeting and to vote for that matter. Which brings us back to the motion to approve the agenda. Alora, is this the same hand or do you have a new point? Okay, Catherine, go ahead.
One note with respect to chat, some participants noted that it would be helpful to have something written on screen to be able to understand exactly what's going on as conversation goes forward. And they asked if we could have something on the screen shared so that they can keep track of what's going on.
Yeah, I can share my screen with the PDF of the agenda. Okay, we are on the motion to approve the agenda as presented. Alora, would you like to speak to that motion?
There was a motion previously proposed by someone, which I wanted to second, to put the end point of the meeting time at 8:30 or 9 so that we're able to get through everything on the agenda.
Okay, so I will ask if you're comfortable making a motion to postpone the adjournment time of the meeting to 9 p.m. That's good to you?
I can make that motion.
Is there, okay, I see Abhiraj has raised a hand, which I shall interpret to be a second to the motion. If people could lower their hands, please. So now we are speaking on a motion to amend the agenda to extend the adjournment time to 9 p.m. Does anybody wish to speak to this motion? Okay, I see nobody wishing to speak to this motion. As I think it shall be rather uncontroversial, I will ask those who oppose the motion to raise their hand now. If you oppose extending the adjournment time to 9 p.m., please raise your hand. And I will give you until 7:45. I'm going back on my word because I realize the whole point of asking opposition first is that it is for uncontroversial things. So seeing two hands raised, one hand raised to oppose the amendment to push adjournment by an hour, I will consider that the motion has carried. So we have amended the agenda to extend the adjournment time to 9 p.m. Now we're back to the main motion, which has now been amended, which says that, so be it resolved that the general meeting approve the agenda. It will be as amended. I can't change the text of the PDF, but we've amended to change the adjournment time by an hour. Anybody wish to speak to the main motion? Okay. Now we will, seeing no further comment on this, we will vote on approving the agenda with the new adjournment time. Does anybody oppose the motion to approve the agenda as amended with the later adjournment time? If you oppose this motion, raise your hand. I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay. Please lower hands. And does anybody oppose, or does anybody wish to abstain on this motion? I should ask as well. Now is the opportunity to do so. I'll give you about 20 seconds. Okay. So the motion will carry. And we have approved the agenda. We proceed to item 4, receiving the fiscal year 2021 audit report and appointment of the fiscal year 2022 auditors. The general meeting, before reaching quorum, has already had an opportunity to review the audited financial statements and to ask questions about the audit report. So we'll go to a motion. Be it resolved that the general meeting reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct the fiscal year 2022 audit as recommended by the board of directors. Does anybody wish to move this motion? Catherine Chow, I see your hand is up. I'll ask you specifically if you wish to move this. Okay. I see Sahil and Cannon, who I will take to be movers, the mover and the seconder of the motion to reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers. Would either of you wish to speak to this motion? Okay. Seeing none, and given that we've already discussed this, and that by my estimation it shall be uncontroversial, I will ask, does anybody oppose the motion to reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers to conduct the fiscal year 2022 audit as recommended by the board of directors? If you oppose, raise your hand now, and I'll give you about 30 seconds. Okay. Does anybody wish to abstain on the motion to reappoint PricewaterhouseCoopers? Give you similar amount of time. Okay, the motion carries unanimously. Next is a progress report on WUSA governance, which I've already given. There were no motions on this, so we shall skip it. Next is, and I'll say you can read the presentation on the website where this agenda is posted, and please contact me or your counselors or anybody in student government if you have questions. Next is the society's proposal on compulsory fee assessment. There's a motion. Whereas society fees were historically assessed on an opt-out basis, whereby payment was compulsory on Quest and refunds were sought at the respective society office, and whereas the engineering and mathematics societies have, through democratic means, expressed a desire to assess their respective fees on an opt-out basis, then be it resolved that the general meeting call on the university to honor democratic decision-making by students by permitting societies to charge their fees compulsorily or optionally. Is there anyone present who would like to move the motion I've just read? I see Vincent has moved and Catherine has seconded. Vincent, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, so this makes it not compulsory, but allows people to request a refund, and they only get the refund if they go through the term without using any of the society's services. So this solves the problem of a lot of people opt out and then show up to events trying to use, society services, and then they're confused why they can't access them. It also means societies don't need to spend resources trying to police events and, allow or not allow people to access the events. Instead, we just keep track of who attended and then cross-reference it with the list of people who requested a refund. I believe MASLOC and NSLOC both passed these stances through their general meetings, which meant all students were able to attend and vote on the motion. I can't speak to NSLOC, but in MASLOC, it was passed unanimously by students at that meeting.
Thanks, Vincent. Next is William. Please go ahead.
Thank you. A question on how, if you want, this is not on this actual motion itself, but the question is whether I say if you want your vote to be noted, how would that work?
I suppose I honestly am not sure that even in the time of in-person general meetings that we gave members an opportunity to note their votes in any capacity. And I think that's just for the the general meeting doesn't have the same sense of accountability to individual members as like a representative body like council or board does, where one might want to point to their record of how they voted on behalf of students or at the board table, given the liability arising from that. So I don't think, and additionally, given the complexity of like administering this online, I don't think we will be giving people the opportunity to note their votes. So I suppose you can claim how you voted, and people will have to take your word for it.
Okay, then. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is Megan. Please go ahead.
Yeah, just to clarify, we can still choose as a society to allow our members to opt out at the beginning of the term, correct?
That is correct. Yes. The idea of the motion is to allow each society to decide individually whether they would like to assess their fees in the way described by NSLOC and MASSOC or otherwise. It's to advocate that the university allow for that. I should clarify.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next is Nicholas.
Thanks, Ben. I think I just wanted to voice my support of the motion. I think it's fairly common sense. It allows us to have better collective action with our fellow students, and asserts that events run with fewer hiccups. This is wildly popular at a society level, and moving it to WUSA seemed like the next logical step. So I would encourage everyone to vote for the motion at hand on the allocation of student fees to help streamline this process that has been unfortunately hiccuped by such wonderful incentives like the SCI that we've struggled with for a number of years now. So thank you everyone for your time.
And thank you. It appears that we've exhausted the speaking list for the motion. So we will proceed to a vote. Given that I think that this one is relatively more substantive than the other ones, we will ask those in favor to vote, and we'll give a time period. And then we'll ask for those in opposition and those in abstention. So those in favor of the motion that you see on your screen will be given until 7:55 and 30 seconds. So 1 minute from now to vote in favor by raising your hand. There'll be 20 seconds remaining. Mike, can you note the number of people who have raised their hands?
It's 7.
Or Pratik? Somebody.
I counted 47.
Thank you. So we'll lower people's hands at this point. I don't know where to do. Okay. Now we will ask those opposed to the motion that you see on your screen to vote, and you will have until 7:57 and 15 seconds, 1 minute. Thirty seconds remaining to vote in opposition to the motion you read on your screen. Okay. And those who wish to abstain from the motion, please raise your hand. We'll give you 30 seconds to do this. Okay, so the motion carries. We proceed to item number 7, which was a member proposal on support for Ukrainian students. This was discussed before reaching quorum. There's no motion apparent. So as we did with item 5, I think I will suggest that we proceed. I think that's like the fair thing to do. But I will, I guess, I see Abaraj that you have a hand up. I think it, given what we did with number 5, I think that's the only fair thing to do. So we'll go to item number 8, which is the member proposal on the campus goose statue, which is a discussion. We're here. We made it. So who would like to talk about a proposal to install a goose statue on main campus? Vincent, please go ahead.
I'd like to put forward a motion for the goose statue, but chat's closed, so I don't know how to submit it.
Might you dictate it to me?
It's long. Like it's more than 2 sentences.
I'm happy to enable the chat for the motion itself and disable it once again, depending on the
Sure.
speaker's request.
Yeah, we'll do that, Pratik, please.
Yeah. Chat should be open.
That should be the motion. Basically, can I now speak to the motion?
I think it would be proper and to ask if there's a second.
Okay.
Would you like to read it?
You want me to read out the whole motion?
Yes, please.
Whereas the official mascot of the University of Waterloo is King Warrior, and whereas in March 2018, Students' Council decided that the mascot of the Federation of Students shall be a goose, and whereas in March 2018, Students' Council set a stance that the mascot of the university should be a goose, and whereas there's a member proposal for a goose statue to be built, this is build, it should be built, typos happen, to be built on campus, and whereas a goose statue of sufficient quality would be expensive, and whereas it makes sense for the University of Waterloo should pay for a goose statue. There was a typo there. Anyway, then be it resolved that WUSA shall strive to undermine any and all University of Waterloo marketing referring to the warrior with the goal of making the warrior not a recognizable symbol of the University of Waterloo and instead making a goose the recognizable symbol of the university. And be it further resolved that WUSA does not recognize the warrior's the warrior as the mascot of the university. And be it further resolved that WUSA shall refer to the University of Waterloo sports teams as the Waterloo Gooses. And be it further resolved that WUSA shall not refer to the student population as warriors and shall instead refer to the student population as gooses. And be it further resolved that in all marketing and communications, whenever feasible, WUSA will avoid using any variation of warrior and will instead use some variation of goose. And be it further resolved that WUSA calls on the university to abandon King Warrior and replace King Warrior with a goose. And be it further resolved that WUSA calls on the University of Waterloo to erect a large goose statue on campus.
Okay. There's, I believe Nevin intended to second this motion. Is that fair?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Very well. I think the motion speaks for itself, one might say. So we will go to Daniel to speak to the motion on the floor.
Hello. Hold on, is the mic on? Yes, it is. So first of all, I wanted to ask about the cost of this goose statue, and more specifically, like the cost per student. Because while I'm all for a giant goose statue, and that's why I joined here to vote for, like, if it's going to be like $60 out of every student's pocket, I don't think that's reasonable. So it'd be nice to have like an order of magnitude guess for it.
Thank you. I guess I'll say that I don't believe that there have been, I don't think that we have solicited requests for proposal to erect a goose statue. So remains to be seen. We will go, and maybe others can address the issue of cost in their remarks. We'll go to Evan next.
I think this motion is genius. I mean, we've long been being subjected to the propaganda of King Warrior by the university, which doesn't reflect the will of the students at all, clearly. And I mean, like as for cost, like it's made clear, we'll pressure the university into paying for it by just continually sort of edging out the Warriors. I mean, come on, nobody identifies with the Warriors. This is a wonderful motion, I support it wholly.
Thanks. Next is Matthew. Matthew, I don't know if you're speaking, but
Hello, can you hear me now?
yes.
Sorry, I didn't know if the other mic was working. Apparently it wasn't. Yeah, I kind of think that this amendment, like, I get where it's coming from. I get it's fun. I think it really is a waste of our, like, time and resources. We have limited bandwidth talking to the university, and we don't need those conversations dominated by like shenanigans about us refusing to acknowledge what the legal name of a sports team is and all these other things. I think that this is, I get where it's coming from. I think it's a little bit silly, and to a degree, I think it might be out of order because I think it's kind of getting at a much different thing than just getting a goose statue. It does address a goose statue, but it gets at a much different thing than the item proposed. And I don't know that an amendment very much changing the spirit of what the proposal was is in order. But, aside from that, I also disagree that this is a useful way to spend our time and money. I like the statue.
Thanks, Matthew. I do believe that the motion is in order. We'll go next to Edward.
Hi. So I would like to speak against this motion. While I do very much agree with the idea of putting a goose statue on campus, and I wholeheartedly agree with any and all aims towards improving student school spirit and the overall goosification of campus, there are some concerns I have with the operational aspects of this, namely the fact that we are enforcing quite strange rules onto our staff and onto our marketing. So, for example, if we have a sports team that does very well, for example, our football team goes to playoffs, we would be putting out statements saying that the Waterloo Gooses are doing great. And honestly, at the end of the day, as an organization, we have a lot of things to get done, and the marketing staff are already quite burdened with a heavy load, and adding additional restrictions onto the way that they communicate to students is frankly unproductive. And we have really good communication staff who know good ways to reach out to students. They have really acknowledged and embraced the Goose in a lot of their marketing elsewhere. And I think we can full and truly leave it up to them when they can decide the Goose is appropriate to be used, and adding this additional barrier to people who have already demonstrated that they do indeed like the Goose and do indeed know how to do it in a way that appeals to students. I think we are kind of jumping the shark here and putting down these really strict lines in the sand that really, the lines in the sand are much more fun if the staff have the freedom to, play with the rules and adapt to situations instead of having to, strictly go by these exact rules that we're setting out in this motion.
Thanks. Next is Abhiraj.
Hi, can you hear me? Thank you. So, yeah, I would also like to speak against this motion. So, in general, I'm apathetic to the concept of a goose statue, and I'm against this motion in particular. Before I even start talking about the merits of this motion, demerits rather, I would, I say on a practical level, I don't understand what it would even accomplish. Given that a lot of external messaging, well, there's a lot of external messaging by WUSA as well, but but one which is seen by most people would be that by the university. So a lot of our messaging, including the term Waterloo Geese as opposed to Waterloo Warriors, would have no practical effort, practical purpose, but to encourage like an inside joke, which just seems like it just seems like too much effort to waste on an inside joke. More importantly, when we are say congratulating a sports team and referring to them as the Waterloo Geese as opposed to Waterloo Warriors, we are taking away from their achievements, their celebrations, and to again divert the attention to what is essentially, at least in my view, an inside joke. Thirdly, I think that's already been said by Matthew. WUSA is supposed to advocate for the student body to, among others, the university. If WUSA starts doing things like this which undermine the university, at that point we lose out on certain diplomatic advantages, and we are in a negative position with the university, which is not in the best interests of the undergraduate student body. Thank you.
Thanks. Next is Naman, please.
Hi. So I would like to address like a few of the concerns here. So for the cost of the statue, I think readers of our beloved student publication UW Imprint will know that the university just got part of a $13.8 million grant from the government to improve campus infrastructure and things around the campus. So I'm pretty sure that a goose statue could be considered one of the things which is improving campus morale and campus the way that campus looks, and it could come from that $13.8 million. And in that case, it would not really cost the students very much. Yeah. And as for the other bit about the sports teams, I would like to suggest a compromise where WUSA still refers to the student body as the Gooses, because in our heart, we are all Gooses. And it is an inside joke, but it is an inside joke where like 30,000 students are part of the inside joke. So I think that's fine. So I would like to suggest that WUSA still refers to the student body as Gooses, but maybe we can still refer to the athletic teams for now as Warriors. So the athletic teams are the Warriors, and the general student body is the Gooses, and I think that doesn't piss off athletics at all, and at the same time, it accomplishes our goal of like building the headspace in our mind that we are all the gooses. So yeah, I would like to suggest that as a compromise.
I would take that as
Thanks.
friendly.
Oh, pardon me. Can we allow, sorry, Naman, can you provide like text of an amendment you wish to move? And Pratik, have the chat be opened for that purpose?
Yes, I will do that. Give me 1 second. I need to like figure that out because the motion proposed is pretty big.
Chat is open once again.
So we'll wait in a bit of purgatory here.
I can send suggested text. As to the chat, it's geese, not gooses. Like, yeah, but gooses sounds funnier.
I would be open to Vincent sending the text because yeah, he's more experienced in this than I am.
Okay, so Vincent, if you can send amended text, we'll ask Naman if you approve moving an amendment to that effect. We'll ask for a second. And I'm going to take a speakers list. So when we leave the amendment, we come back to the speaking order that I see now.
Chat's turned off. Can we turn on chat?
Yep, it's open.
So this just replaces the stuff about, I guess, using the wrong name for the sports team. You know, remains the thing about reaffirming the stance that was passed by council at some point that the university should change, I guess, the mascot, but doesn't say that like we will refuse to acknowledge like the legal name of the sports team or anything until they actually, you know, make the right decision and change the mascot to a goose.
Nevin, do you agree to move an amendment to make the motion what Vincent has sent in the chat?
Yes.
Okay. I'll take Vincent to have seconded that motion. Can somebody please lower the hands? And I assure you that I have taken your names down. So when we leave the amendment, we'll come back to that list. Does anybody want to speak to the amendment? Matthew.
Just want to confirm you can hear me now. Awesome. I'm going to say, you know, similarly to this amendment, as I said to the previous version, like, you know, I get it. It's fun. We've actually referred to the students in our emails before as gooselings, which I thought was fun, and we can continue to do so. But I don't support anything that just like needlessly binds the marketing team in any direction. It adds complexity. It is a waste of time. It is a waste of resources. Like, I really think we should just be adopting a motion here that says, you know, the general meeting of the Waterloo Undergraduate Student Association supports erecting a goose statue on campus. And like we can chat about like branding and marketing things, you know, maybe briefly give a presentation at council or take student opinions. But like that is like really, really applied operational stuff that you should not be, as a matter of principle, set in a direction of in a general meeting. It really is bad governance. We can call the students gooses. Please don't set the direction, like the basic words that the marketing team can use in a general meeting. Please. Thank you.
Next is Daniel. And I'll, I guess, remind folks, right now we're speaking to whether or not to amend the motion, so to change from what was initially sent to what has subsequently been sent.
Hi. I still think this amendment is in the wrong direction, in my opinion. I think it's kind of silly to, well, it's like, it's not necessary to like force this thing about people being geese instead of warriors. First of all, like geese can make great warriors. And I think if we really wanted to push the zeitgeist that University of Waterloo is a school of geese, we can simply, like, for the sports team, we could just slowly introduce like warriors, like geese wearing warrior apparel, rather than just like straight up saying they're just geese. So I don't think we need to take this aggressive approach. And second of all, I think even this amendment fails to address the core of the issue that most of the people here care about, which is the goose statue. Like, we don't want to wage this war. We just want a goose statue.
Thanks. Next is Naman.
Yeah. So I guess I'm a little bit confused on what the issues here are regarding the things we're telling marketing to do, because this is literally just a find and replace. Like, wherever you were previously going to say warriors, you just say gooses when referring to student bodies. That's like, I don't necessarily understand what the problem is here. This is just like, like WUSA wants to encourage gooses as a term for university students, so WUSA should take action to do that, right?
Thanks. Next is Abhiraj.
Thank you, Ben. So yeah, my issue with this amendment is that it doesn't address the main concerns. Like, the athletics team was just one, like the referring to the athletics team as geese instead of warriors was just one of the concerns. There, so Matthew's mentioned, and like other people have mentioned, that there are concerns related to marketing. There are concerns related to how this affects WUSA advocacy. Other concerns which haven't been mentioned yet include that the undergraduate student body aren't the only stakeholders here. We have alumni who have been referred to as warriors. And correct me if I'm wrong, warriors are the mascot for the entire university. So I would assume that includes graduate students as well. So making this decision at an undergraduate level without consulting alumni, grad students, etc., just feels incorrect. Like, feels wrong to begin with, and the biggest thing is this amendment is addressing one of the issues, and that too, and that's barely enough. For the discussion is just going to come back to what the concerns are, and these concerns are there with and these concerns remain with what is the core of that motion, that is using that is undermining the university's sorry, just want to read the exact text. Undermining, okay, I can't find that, but essentially like the first line which says undermining the university, calling the referring to the mascot as warriors.
Point of order, that text was removed in the amendment.
Okay, sorry about that. However, still, that's still not referring to the student population as warriors, is in effect still undermining what the university does, and it doesn't take into account all the shareholders, as I mentioned earlier, as well as the other concerns. But apologies for not seeing that that's been taken out in the amendment. Thank you.
It's okay. Thank you, Abhiraj. And I'll ask members not to interrupt, especially given the vast majority of attendees have not had the chance to be given mic permissions. It's inappropriate for members who have, because they have spoken to to interrupt others. So wait your turn. Next is Alora, please.
There we go. I move that we move the question. I think we've heard some of the same comments.
Sure. Is there somebody who would like to second calling the question on the amendment? Okay, I see Tayden is the first person who raised their hand afterwards. So we are calling the question on the amendment. So that is to change the motion from try to change the motion from what you see first in the chat by Vincent at 7:59 to what you see at 8:13. So I'll ask to have hands lowered. And those who are in favor of calling the question and would like to proceed immediately to a vote to raise their hands now until 20 seconds after 8:23. So if you are in favor of calling the question on the amendment, you have just under a minute to do so. Do we know how many have voted in favor of calling the question?
54 right now, 55.
Okay, 55. Can you lower hands, please? Those opposed to calling the question, once the hands are lowered, give me a moment. Okay, those opposed to calling the question who would like to continue debating the amendment, please raise your hand now. I'll give you until 15 seconds past 8:25. 1 minute. Okay, it appears that the motion to call the question has carried. So we proceed immediately to a vote on the motion to amend a motion originally moved by Vincent to replace it with the second thing sent in the chat. So those in favor of the motion to amend by replacing the first message by Vincent with the second one, you will have until 8:26, just over a minute, vote in favor of the amendment. Do we know how many are in favor of the amendment?
36.
36.
Okay, lower hands, please. Those opposed to the motion to amend by way of replacing the first message with the second. Those opposed, you have until 20 seconds past 8:27. 1 minute. I count 6 opposed. Lower hands, please. And we'll do those wishing to abstain. We'll give you until 8:29. Okay, the motion is carried. Now we're voting, now we're considering the motion as amended, which is the second thing which was sent in chat. We had a speaking list previously, so I returned to that speaking list. So first is Steph, please go ahead.
Point of privilege, I believe I was the first on that list.
Thanks, Laura. Not according to the list I have written down, for better or worse. So once we finish that list, you will be next. So Steph, please go ahead. I cannot hear you. Okay. So I still can't hear Steph. Next on the list is Nicholas.
Thank you very much, Ben. I wanted to briefly touch on a point that Naman brought up, namely that I think it's valuable to, in general. Sorry, let me start once more. I think it's valuable to not consider ourselves to value our position with the university to be above our ability to advocate for the desires of the student body. So to Matt's point there, I think it's a bit disingenuous to consider the value in the future of having a stable relationship with the university more valuable than doing an adequate job of representing the students at the time. To Nauman's point on the $13.8 million that were advocated, it's already an insulting token position that's being presented to the university. It's much too little, much too late. So I see no I see no fault on our part to try and use part of it to support what is a joke in return, given that this is a sum that is much too little to actually address any of the issues that we need to deal with. And finally, I think we see today, especially with the increase of attendance, immediately after we got to the engaging tomfoolery that is at hand, that in fact there's not a strict issue with student engagement at the University of Waterloo. We're simply not addressing it in interesting ways, and we're not addressing issues that students seem to be passionate about. And I think I will yield the rest of my time to Steph so that they're able to speak almost in the correct order.
Yeah, I'll allow Steph to go next. And for clarity, perhaps I'll read the rest of the speaking order. Nicholas, you had raised your hand, but the reason I called on you was that you were on the speaking list from the time where we had lowered hands when we went to move to the amendment.
Oh, I was just asserting that I was still had a point to make.
Very well, but it might not be clear to others that the reason for which you were called on was not due to your hand. After Steph's turn, it will be Vincent, then Neil Parikh, Daniel Perchensky, Nathaniel M. Young. There might have been a longer last name. Mary Sabirzma, Caleb, Dara, something, I can't read my own handwriting, Abigail H., Evan G., then Matthew. Then it would be Laura after that. So Steph, please go ahead.
Okay. So hi, if Pratik could open the chat again, I'd like to propose an amendment to the motion. Unfortunately, it's on my computer, so I'll just sort of speak to what it is trying to get at before I actually put it into the chat. But essentially, again, I, love the energy that, we're bringing here. Although I proudly say that there's a time and place for it. I believe that, like, even in general, sort of bringing this motion up, that still communicates something meaningful to the university, and that we do not necessarily, as WUSA, need to support specific, the specific sort of motion sort of brought about here, as we've seen sort of in a previous, I forget if it was a GM or a council meeting, but where obscenity PD, I hope people know what I'm referring to because I probably shouldn't be swearing right now. But even though that specific motion did not pass, it definitely did grab the attention of CE, and they were a lot more sort of receptive to a lot of the concerns that students were bringing up, to the point at which we managed to get a PD working group. I think that this motion existing here has served its function. We don't really need to go into specifics, and I think each individual student is sort of empowered in their own way to reaffirm their opinion or not that the true symbol of Waterloo is the goose. I think that the major sort of point of this member proposal here was to explore the erection of a campus goose statue. I recognize that there are concerns sort of about feasibility and cost and who should be paying for it. Although I don't believe we're going to have answers to that at this point. So the amendment I intend to bring forward is essentially giving WUSA a mandate to explore how much it would cost and what could be done with regards to installing a goose statue or sculpture somewhere on main campus. The amendment also includes provisions that WUSA should seek out external funding from the university or the Graduate Student Association or alumni. There are plenty other places. And specifically, again, I'll post my motion, but by requiring the approval for funding if it comes out of WUSA's operating budget. If it comes out of that, having a requirement that it needs to be approved by the Budget and Appropriations Committee is one way to ensure that it is value for money. Or I feel like I had another point. But yeah, I believe this is like a good compromise. Again, I appreciate the jokes and stuff, and I would encourage them in most places, however, not during sort of the formal floor here when people are tired and want to sort of finish things off. Okay, I will send that in a moment. Thank you.
So we'll wait for the motion from Steph to appear, and then we'll ask someone to second. And once again, we shall keep a speakers list beyond what has been elaborated here. Okay, so there's a motion. Does anybody want to second the motion just sent?
I'll second and ask it be taken as friendly.
The motion at this point belongs to the assembly, so we shall consider it formally. So now I have taken a list as well, in addition to the list taken when we proceeded last time. So we will lower people's hands. Does anybody want to speak to the amendment that Steph has just elaborated about? Did we lower hands? I'm sorry, I looked away. Okay. Now, okay, Alora, please go ahead.
In view of time and addressing all the points on the agenda, I move that we call the question.
Is there a second to calling the question? I see Tayden has raised their hand, so I will take them to have seconded the motion to call the question to amend by way of replacing what has just been sent in the chat by Steph with the motion that's previously the second thing that Vincent sent, which is the motion that would have been on the floor. So, calling the question, please lower hands. Okay, so if you are in favor of calling the question and proceeding immediately to a vote on the amendment,